Chapter 961. This is the timeline before Luaccio left South America after the Christmas Day incident. Coordinates, Area 11. Recently, the atmosphere in the Suzuki family was particularly tense. Because at the Christmas Eve banquet last month, eldest young master Natsuya Suzuki had once again ruined the Suzuki Kai's business with Yuichi Suzuki because of his stupidity. After the father and son returned to the Suzuki family, they made a big scene. Eldest young master Natsuya Suzuki even ran away from home and had not returned for more than 20 days. Of course, eldest young master Natsuya Suzuki had run away from home many times, but this time it seemed to be a little different. This time, Yuichi Suzuki had used almost all of the Suzuki Kai's power, but still could not grasp young master Shaya's whereabouts. This had never happened before. Yuichi Suzuki was 68 years old this year. He gave birth to Natsuya Suzuki when he was 42 years old, and gave birth to second young master Haruxan Suzuki when he was 45 years old. Of course, although he had reached the age of retirement, Yuichi Suzuki's body was still much better than many young people. But today, Yuichi Suzuki seemed to have aged a little. At this time, in the Suzuki family's house, Yuichi Suzuki, who was writing in the quiet room, suddenly stopped, because at this time, the door of the quiet room was slowly pushed open, and second young master Haruxan Suzuki was kneeling in the corridor outside the door. "Father," Haruko Suzuki respectfully called. "Still no news of your elder brother?" Yuichi Suzuki turned around and asked. Haruko Suzuki lowered his head. "I'm very sorry, father. I have already mobilized all the people to look for him, but still can't find his whereabouts. Father, I'm thinking whether we should use the power of the Metropolitan Police Department." "Stupid. Let them know that our Suzuki Kai's young master ran away from home." Yuichi Suzuki coldly snorted. "I'm very sorry, father." Haruko Suzuki lowered his head almost to his chest. "I will definitely find my elder brother. Please rest assured, father." Unexpectedly, Yuichi Suzuki suddenly said at this time, "No need to look for him. Let him suffer some hardships outside. No one dares to provoke a hungry lion. You call all the people outside back. In addition, tell all the hall masters to pay attention to him. Once he appears, they can't use any means to support him, since he ran away from home. He should be aware." "Yes, I'll immediately contact them." Suzuki hurriedly responded. "Do you have anything to do this afternoon?" Suzuki Yuichi suddenly asked. In addition to going to the office, there are only a few company documents to sign. Nothing important. Haruko Suzuki raised his head at this time. "Father, is there anything I can do?" Suzuki Yuichi suddenly closed his eyes. At the same time, a purple light flashed in the eyes of Suzuki Harashin, who was kneeling in the corridor. At this time, Yuichi Suzuki suddenly frowned, as if he was a little sleepy, and stretched out his hand to rub his eyebrows. "Father, are you all right?" Haruko Suzuki hurriedly asked at this time. Yuichi Suzuki shook his head and opened his eyes. "I'm all right. If you have nothing to do in the afternoon, accompany me to go out. Next, we have an important matter to do in Suzuki Kai. This matter is very important to Suzuki Kai. You need to be careful. Don't be like your brother, who will only spoil things." Haruko Suzuki asked, "Father, what is it?" "You'll know when we arrive." Yuichi Suzuki waved his hand at this time. "Go out, I want to have a rest." "Yes." Haruko Suzuki nodded, and then slowly pulled the door behind him. After that, Haruko Suzuki left the corridor. On the way, a servant came out. After seeing Haruko Suzuki, she hurriedly stepped aside and lowered her head. Haruko Suzuki just smiled, like a gentle and elegant young master, until he returned to his room. When he returned to his room, Haruko Suzuki's expression suddenly changed, giving people a feeling of evil charm. He suddenly sat on the sofa and picked up a wine glass. At this time, a shadow suddenly appeared in the room. The shadow emerged from Haruko Suzuki's shadow. "Is this your plan, Yamata Serpent?" The shadow said coldly. "Influence Yuichi Suzuki's spirit and make him gradually get closer to you. Brother Lien-jun, it's only been a few days. You're too anxious." Haruko Suzuki. Hakata smiled at this time. We were seriously injured in Yen Wuyue's world. Now I'm attached to Haruxin Suzuki's body, but this guy's obsession is too strong, which affects my thoughts. There are some things that I have to do even if I don't want to. You call yourself an ancestor who plays with souls, but in the end, you can't even solve a mortal's obsession. The shadow. Lianjun suddenly sneered. Hakata said indifferently, Brother Lianjun, you should know my situation because you're not much better than me. Now you and I are tied together by fate. If I'm in trouble, you won't be any better. Lianjun suddenly became silent. Hakata said at this time, Brother Lianjun, I know it's really hard for you to not have a carrier, but do you want to find a carrier casually or one that suits you better? If you find a carrier casually like me and Haruxin Suzuki, isn't it asking for trouble? I don't have a choice, but you're different. Lianjun said, I just feel that you're too slow. Since you already have a carrier, why stay in this small place? Kelowna is our goal. Hakata said, I say, Brother Lianjun, no matter what, I'm the one who has been separated from the modern realm for hundreds of years, and you've always been active in the modern realm. You should be more aware of the changes of time than I am. Then, do you really not know the benefits of me staying in the Suzuki family now? Let's not talk about other things, just the matter of finding a carrier. With the wealth of the Suzuki family, it's much easier to find a carrier that suits you than us looking for a needle in a haystack. Right? I don't have time to waste. Lianjun's voice suddenly became gloomy. I've separated, which means that the power of the greedy wolf has become ownerless. It now stays in the body of Madame Lianjun. After some time, when Madame Lianjun enters, she will become the real Lianjun planet. At that time, I will really have nothing. Hakata, you don't want to just be a useless remnant soul, right? The Greedy Wolf clan has had a Greedy Wolf shaman for generations, but I don't see any generation that can replace you in Lianjun planet. Hakata said casually, I still say the same thing. There are some things that can't be rushed. Brother Lianjun, now that Yuichi Suzuki is under my influence, he will gradually put Haruxin Suzuki in important positions. As long as I eliminate Haruxin Suzuki's obsession and completely control this body, there will be benefits for us. Now, you just wait patiently. Let his father put him in an important position and get his father's approval. Other than that, what else? Lianjun asked coldly. The obsession of this mortal is actually so strong. After all, he is also a true soul, and his aptitude is not bad. Hakata smiled. Haruxin Suzuki's greatest wish is to surpass his brother, Natsuya Suzuki. Whether it is to wait for Yuichi Suzuki's approval or to become the head of the Suzuki Kai, is all based on surpassing his brother. In that case, don't dawdle. Hurry up and show me Natsuya Suzuki. Don't worry, I already know where he is. Hakata sneered at this time. But wait until I accompany Yuichi Suzuki in the afternoon and see what he is going to do. The main dish is delicious last. Suzuki. In the midst of the loud music, the manager of the disco bar was shouting for a recently hired waiter. This was a rather handsome man. In the words of the manager of the disco bar, if he wanted to be a gigolo, he would definitely have a much better future than being a waiter here. What's the matter, manager? The handsome man called Suzuki quickly walked over. The guest in room 209 has placed an order. You can send these things over. The manager of the disco bar pointed at the already prepared drinks and said, This time, don't send the wrong drinks. You've already sent the wrong drinks 5 times this week. If there is a 6th time, don't blame me for firing you. Understood, manager. The man called Suzuki scratched his head with a helpless face. In fact, what the manager said was true. He had already sent the wrong drinks 5 times in a row. Suzuki shook his head and secretly encouraged himself. Nowadays, it was not easy to find a job outside, especially since he did not even have a high school diploma. The types of jobs that he could do were very limited. In fact, Suzuki often wondered if his father had injected some inferior genes into his mother when he was born. As a result, ever since he could remember, he always felt that he was not smart enough. Phew, that was close. I almost sent the wrong drinks again. Holding the drinks ordered by the guest in his hands, Suzuki suddenly stopped. Because he was distracted, he almost sent the drinks to another room. But when Suzuki was about to walk back, he suddenly stopped and frowned. In this room that he had almost made a mistake and entered, there seemed to be a strange sound coming from it. Since young, Suzuki's hearing was very good, and his physical strength was abnormal. However, his grades were not good, so he was always jokingly called a wild animal. It seemed to be a woman's cry. Suzuki put his ear to the door and listened carefully. It seemed to be a woman's cry for help when she was resisting. Well, this kind of thing happened from time to time. It was probably those who were easily invited to this place by men, thinking that they could find some benefits, but in the end, they found that they had fallen into a trap. Suzuki shook his head. He had seen this kind of thing many times. Basically, when this kind of thing happened, both parties were involved. He had better send the drinks to the guest as soon as possible. This time, he could not mess it up again. However, when Suzuki was about to leave, the door of the room was suddenly knocked open. A woman in messy clothes ran out with her head down and bumped into Suzuki. The things in Suzuki's hands were suddenly knocked away. At this moment, Suzuki's pupils suddenly enlarged. He instinctively squatted down and caught the drinks at the moment when they were about to fall to the ground. Oh! Suzuki suddenly wiped the cold sweat. If the drinks were broken, he would probably have to pack up and leave tonight. The strict manager would probably not let him go this time. "Help me!" The woman's cry for help came from the side. Suzuki looked up. It turned out that after the woman was caught, two young men rushed out of the room. They directly pulled the woman's arms and dragged her back into the room. "Help me!" The woman pinned her hope on Suzuki at this time. Unexpectedly, Suzuki acted as if he did not see or hear anything. He just lowered his head and quickly packed up the rest of the things, then stood up and prepared to leave. "Help me, please. Woo-woo." The woman's mouth had been covered, and she was finally dragged into the room. The door was closed in an instant, but there was still a young man outside the door, staring at Suzuki. Suzuki still acted as if he did not see anything and turned to leave. But the young man suddenly grabbed Suzuki's shoulder. "Stop! I didn't let you go. I didn't see anything. I'm just a very ordinary waiter." Suzuki emphasized. "What did I say to you?" The young man directly turned Suzuki's body around and stretched out his hand to take away the drinks on the tray. "Sir, this doesn't seem to be ordered by you." Suzuki looked at the young man and frowned. "This is ordered by another guest in the room. Why don't you order something else? This guy seems to be on drugs. So troublesome. I want it, so what? If you have a problem, ask your manager to come and see me." The young man snorted and walked directly into the room with the drinks. Suzuki suddenly grabbed the young man's arm and tried to smile. "Sir, don't embarrass me. Why don't you order something else, and I'll send it to you personally." Bang! At this time, the young man directly hit Suzuki's head with the bottle in his hand. Because it was too strong, the bottle was smashed in an instant, and the drinks directly spilled on Suzuki's face. "Here you go. Go away." Suzuki stretched out his hand and wiped his face. He took a deep breath and tried to smile. "How could I accidentally break it? Customer, can you help me prove that I wasn't the one who broke it? I really don't want to lose this job." "Are you an idiot?" The young man was stunned, looking at Suzuki, and suddenly asked. "I didn't hear it." Suzuki was still full of smiles. "I said, are you a *king idiot? Idiot, idiot." Suzuki suddenly punched the young man in the abdomen. It was unknown how much power this punch contained. Under the power of this punch, the young man was directly blasted to the door of the private room, and even the door was knocked down. "I said I didn't hear it, and you still said it." Suzuki stepped forward, expressionless, and said indifferently, "I'll kill you. Yin 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 PS1. Let's talk about the matter of Jia Saw. I've always remembered it before, but now I look at the reward record. It turns out that there is a reward for the sect leader. Thanks to Lemon Candy 2 for 150,000 yuan and 310,000 yuan. So I became the sect leader after rounding up. That's why 22 became 24. PS2. I really will return it, but I can only promise to keep updating during the new year. Please forgive me." Chapter 962. Including the young man who hadn't come in yet, there were actually 3 men in the room. In addition, there were actually 2 women here. One of them ran out and failed to escape and was dragged back. As for the other, she was lying on the sofa. Her clothes were messy, but she was motionless and seemed to have fainted. At this time, a man with dyed green hair was pressing the woman he caught on the sofa and directly tearing off the woman's blouse with his hand. Buttons flew out one by one. The green man's face was full of excitement, while the woman struggled and cried desperately. But suddenly, the door of the room was knocked open with a bang, and then a young man fell to the ground. Kenji, the green-haired young man, was stunned and subconsciously called out the name of the young man who fell to the ground. Kill you. At the same time, what Suzuki said at the door was clearly heard by the people in the room. The green-haired young man and the other young man frowned at the same time. Gaoji, go take a look. The green-haired young man shook his head at this time, and, at the same time, he mercilessly punched the face of the woman under him. With this punch, the struggling woman immediately fainted. The young man named Gao Ji quickly walked to Kenji's side, pushed him a few times, then raised his head and said, "Young Master Feng." Kenji fainted. Hearing this, green-haired, young Master Feng frowned, stood up, stared at Suzuki at the door, and said coldly, "Friend, which gang are you from? Are all the people who come out now like this?" Suzuki put his hands in a karate boxing posture. "If so, then I have no choice but to teach you a lesson." "Umph," young Master Feng sneered. Gaoji stood up, then clenched his fist and put it in front of him. At the same time, his legs began to jump slightly. It seemed that he was good at using Western boxing. Being able to knock Kenji out proves that you have some skills, but Gaoji is different. At this time, young Master Feng calmly sat down, poured himself a glass of wine, and crossed his legs. "Well, enjoy it, you stupid scum." Bang! Young Master Feng, who was drinking wine with his head lowered, suddenly raised his head, because the coffee table in front of him had been smashed by a figure. It was actually Gao Ji. At this moment, the young man named Gao Ji's eyes rolled back, and he was foaming at the mouth. He had completely lost consciousness. Young Master Feng immediately narrowed his eyes and sized up the man who had consecutively knocked down two of his subordinates. His tall and straight figure imperceptibly gave people a kind of enormous pressure. Young Master Feng took a deep breath and put down the wine glass. So I said, "Why don't you just let Gao Ji beat you to death?" In a flash, young Master Feng pressed one hand on the coffee table at a terrifying speed and used the force to jump out. At the same time, he swept a leg at Suzuki. His speed was too fast. For a moment, Suzuki seemed to be unable to react. He instinctively raised his left arm to block. However, the strength of this leg sweep was too great, making Suzuki feel as if he was hit by a speeding motorcycle. His whole body flew out horizontally and directly hit the TV on the wall. Bang, bang, bang. Because of Suzuki's impact, the TV immediately fell apart. At the same time, his body directly hit the wall behind the TV, causing cracks to appear. Suzuki fell to the ground. "You wanted me to do it." Young Master Feng heaved a sigh of relief. He straightened his clothes and looked coldly at Suzuki, who was lying on the ground. Mortals shouldn't overstep the boundaries of mortals and meddle in other people's business. Young Master Feng suddenly stopped talking. At this time, Suzuki shook his head and climbed up from the ground. Suzuki also frowned and looked at his left arm. He shook his left arm and felt that it was a bit numb. Suzuki looked at the wall that he smashed, and then looked at this person called young Master Feng. "I'll get it back to you." A fist, without young Master Feng noticing, fiercely hit his face. This time, young Master Feng's whole body flew out, and at the same time, crashed into the wall. Almost the same as Suzuki's situation, young Master Feng's body crashed into the wall, causing cracks to appear. But unlike Suzuki, he didn't fall down. Instead, he staggered and stood up. However, young Master Feng used his hand to cover his mouth, but the bridge of his nose was obviously crooked. Blood flowed from young Master Feng's fingers. Obviously, this was the reason he covered his mouth. At this time, Suzuki furrowed his brows and looked at his fist. Then, he looked at young Master Feng. "This guy, you're pretty good at taking a beating." Young Master Feng's eyes suddenly widened, as if they were about to spit fire. He removed the hand that was covering his mouth and saw that his mouth was full of blood. At the same time, 3 teeth fell out of his hand. You actually beat up the noble me like this. It's just food, you actually... Young Master Fang's eyes suddenly became gloomy and cold. In the dusky private room, young Master Fang's fingernails suddenly became sharp. However, Suzuki was a man who didn't give his opponent any time to breathe once a fight started. The moment young Master Fang said those ruthless words, Suzuki attacked again. His body suddenly bent down, and at the same time, he threw a standard karate punch. His fist hit young Master Fang's abdomen, causing his whole body to bend over in an instant. Suzuki followed up with a punch that landed on young Master Fang's chin and sent him flying. Beat the opponent until they couldn't resist. This was the principle that Suzuki had been taught ever since he learned how to fight. Suzuki didn't give young Master Fang any time to breathe. His fists bombarded young Master Fang's body one after another. After an unknown amount of time, even with Suzuki's terrifying physical strength, sweat was dripping from his forehead. He grabbed young Master Fang's collar and lifted him up. Looking at this guy's face covered in blood and the blood flowing from the corners of his mouth, he couldn't help but say, Are you still human? Don't tell me you're a monster." Suzuki had never met someone who could take a beating like this before. At this time, young Master Fang's drooping eyelids twitched a few times. He forced himself to open them a bit and looked at the waiter who had beaten him until he didn't look human anymore. His lips moved as if he wanted to say something. "Suzuki, what are you doing?" At this time, an angry voice came from outside the room. It was the disco's manager. The manager's finger trembled as he pointed at Suzuki. Looking at everything in the room, he was both shocked and angry. Suzuki, you..." Suzuki suddenly put young Master Fang down and raised both his hands. "Manager, listen to me. It's not what you think." "Scram, you're fired," the manager cursed. "Wait for the lawyer's letter. You have nothing to do with our disco. I'm going to call the police." Hearing this, Suzuki immediately rushed in front of the manager. This gave the manager a fright. At this time, Suzuki suddenly opened his hands. This immediately scared the manager so much that he stuck to the wall behind him and said in a trembling voice, What do you want to do?" "Suzuki, I'm telling you, don't be reckless." Unexpectedly, Suzuki suddenly put his hands together and made a begging expression. With a bitter face, he said, "Manager, I'm begging you. Please give me one more chance." The manager was also stunned. Then he suddenly grabbed Suzuki's hand and grabbed towards his neck. Like a pig being slaughtered, he screamed, "Suzuki, don't be impulsive. Let me go. Let me go." "What's the situation?" Suzuki blinked, only to see that the manager kept winking at her. Suzuki still didn't understand and scratched his head. The manager immediately wrinkled his eyebrows and roared in a low voice, "Go, idiot. Why aren't you leaving? Are you waiting for the police to catch you? Go." Oh. It was only then that Suzuki realized that the manager was trying to help him. He quickly nodded. Given his current situation, if he was caught by the Metropolitan Police Department, it would indeed be troublesome. "Thank you." Suzuki quickly nodded and ran away. After seeing Suzuki run away, the manager let out a sigh of relief. Then, he looked inside the room and wrinkled his eyebrows. "Young man, why are you always so impulsive?" he sighed, then hurriedly ran into the private room and helped young Master Fang up from the floor. "Guest. Customer, how are you?" "Customer. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. This waiter was only hired yesterday. We also didn't know that he was a violent person. But don't worry, I will definitely get revenge for you. How about I call an ambulance for you?" "You let him go, right?" "I heard it." Young Master Fang, who had his head lowered, suddenly said in a low voice. "Customer, what did you say?" A blood-curdling scream suddenly came from the room. Not long after, young Master Fang walked out of the room. He reached out and touched his lips. His mouth was still full of blood, but his crooked nose was already healed. There were no wounds on his face, other than his clothes being torn. He looked quite spirited. Young Master Fang's eyes suddenly became hazy. "Suzuki," the direction of the car was in the suburbs. According to Haruko Suzuki's memories, The nearby land seemed to belong to a landlord family. Later on, the social system was reformed, but this landlord family still stood tall. Actually, in this country, there were many similar gentry, so it wasn't strange. The Takizawa clan. The car suddenly drove into a secluded path, and Yuichi Suzuki's voice sounded at this time. Haruko Suzuki asked curiously, "The Takizawa clan? Father, are you talking about the owner of this land?" Yuichi Suzuki nodded. The current chief cabinet secretary, Asano, was born in the Takizawa clan. Asano's wife is the daughter of the Takizawa clan. In addition, there are many descendants of the Takizawa clan who hold positions in important places. Hearing this, Haruko Suzuki already knew the influence of the Takizawa clan in this country's political arena. This ancient clan indeed had great power in the political arena. "Father, is the Suzuki clan cooperating with the Takizawa clan?" Harrison Suzuki frowned. Harrison Suzuki. 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 For a supernatural creature like Hakata, it would be very troublesome to have contact with the human rights system. After all, since the beginning of modern times, people have flourished. "Have you heard of Sufu?" Yuichi Suzuki asked suddenly. Haruko Suzuki froze. Whether Haruko Suzuki knew or not, Hakata must have known about Sufu, the man who searched for the elixir of immortality. "I've heard of his story," Haruko Suzuki said after thinking for a while. Yuichi Suzuki nodded. "Then I'll pick the important one. The Takizawa clan has a letter that is said to have been left behind by Sufu. In the letter is a map of a certain Qin emperor's mausoleum. The Takizawa clan plans to explore this imperial mausoleum. It is said that in the imperial mausoleum, there is a treasure that the first emperor used to suppress the world. This is the Takizawa clan's goal." Haruko Suzuki's eyes suddenly narrowed. The treasure that the first emperor used to suppress the world? If it was true, wouldn't it be on the same level as the nation's divine artifact? "Father, I don't understand." Haruko Suzuki shook his head. "Why would the Takizawa clan want to cooperate with us for such an important thing?" Yuichi Suzuki shook his head. "You're wrong. The Takizawa clan didn't want to cooperate with us. They just wanted to hire us. Have you forgotten? The Imperial Mausoleum this time is in Huan Nation. And with the Takizawa clan's secret influence in the domestic political scene, how could Huan Nation not have a record of it? If the Takizawa clan were to do it themselves, if they don't handle it well, it wouldn't be a problem that can be solved by diplomatic means alone. So that's how it is." Suzuki-chun, Xin nodded. Yuichi Suzuki then said seriously, "When we go to the Takizawa clan's main house, remember not to offend them. Compared to such an ancient and huge clan, the Suzuki clan is still too young. This time, the Takizawa clan asked me to bring the heir along. Fortunately, it's you who came. If it was your brother, I'm afraid it would still cause trouble in the end. Father, give my brother some time." Haruko Suzuki smiled slightly. However, there was a sense of hatred in Haruko Suzuki's heart. Hakata could clearly feel that this was Haruko Suzuki's lingering obsession. Haruko Suzuki looked out of the car window. In the deep mountains, he could vaguely see an ancient and huge building complex. It should be the main house of the Takizawa clan. As for why the Takizawa clan asked Yuichi Suzuki to bring the heir along, the meaning behind it was worth thinking about. If it was just to discuss the development of the Imperial Mausoleum, there was no need for the heir to come along. Considering that the Takizawa clan hired the Suzuki clan this time, it wasn't hard to figure out. The Takizawa clan's request this time was to use the heir of the Suzuki clan as a hostage, right? Fortunately, it was Haruko Suzuki who came this time. If it was Natsuya Suzuki, it would only mess things up. Yuichi Suzuki probably felt lucky that Natsuya Suzuki ran away from home, so he suddenly canceled the order to search for him. Chapter 963. Please give me 2 more days. If you don't have money, then don't rent a house. Just like that, Suzuki's luggage was thrown out. Suzuki picked up his only luggage dejectedly and carried it on his back. He planned to go to the nearby construction site to see if there were any temporary jobs. Suzuki only had a few $100s left in his pocket. Eating a bowl of noodle soup was very grim, but he never lost confidence in life. This was probably because he was an idiot, not knowing why. Suzuki always felt that he earned every second he came to this world, so he never felt sad. He remembered that his late mother had said that his coming to this world was a great miracle for his parents, a miraculous life. As long as he was still alive, no matter how many difficulties he faced, he could overcome them, right? Goo. Or, let's solve the problem of dinner first. There were no temporary workers in the nearby construction site, which destroyed Suzuki's original plan. But Suzuki thought of the disco bar's manager. He didn't know how the manager handled the situation. Suddenly, he became a little worried. Suzuki decided to secretly go back to the disco bar. At least, he had to thank the manager properly. He quickly came to the disco bar where he used to work, then went to the back door. Suzuki didn't have any communication tools with him. His phone was thrown away when he ran away from home. But just when Suzuki was about to knock on the door, the disco bar's back door suddenly opened. Out of habit, Suzuki chose to hide himself at this time. He was like a monkey, nimbly climbing up the sewer pipe next to him. At this time, an employee of the disco bar, Suzuki recognized the employee's appearance, accompanied a police officer out. Did the manager really call the police? Suzuki was a little nervous as he listened quietly. "That's all I know about Suzuki," Wang Yao said. The employee replied nervously. He didn't seem to have a mobile phone. The manager brought it back from outside. The manager said that he found it on the road. He saw him sleeping alone on the street and looked very pitiful. "I really didn't expect that he would do such a thing. He killed the manager and 2 female customers. That's too cruel. We will step up the search for this fugitive." The police officer nodded at this time. "Now, take me to look around. I want to search for any suspicious clues." "Okay." The employee nodded, but at this moment, the employee felt that he was pressed down by something. It was a very heavy object that pressed him to the ground in an instant. He turned his head in horror and suddenly said, "Ling, Suzuki, Suzuki, help, help." At this time, Suzuki was squatting on the employee's back. Then he reached out his hand and grabbed the employee's hair. "Hey, what did you say? Who did I kill? Don't move. Put your hands up." At this time, the police officer quickly pulled out his gun and became abnormally nervous. "You can't escape. You're Suzuki?" "Ling, not Suya Suzuki." The police officer's expression changed from nervousness to shock, and then to fear. Because he recognized the real identity of this murderer Suzuki. Most of the police officers in the Kano area had probably been told about this young man's background. Suzuki Kai's young master, known as the strongest guy on earth. It was rumored that this guy could flip over a car with his bare hands, as if he wasn't a human being. "Hello." Suzuki waved his hand at this time, as if he was greeting the police officer. Then he continued to lift the employee's head. "Hey, hurry up and tell me, why did I kill the manager and the female customers? You better make it clear to me, or else I will kill you." Perhaps it was because she was used to seducing the Vitality organization. At this moment, Suzuki's entire face was like that of a demon. She was so ferocious that the staff of the disco bar trembled in fear. They hurriedly shouted for help at the police. "Ling, not Suya Suzuki. Don't you mess around. This is a legal society, a society." The police officer shook his legs and braced himself. "Don't disturb me." Suzuki raised his head and stared fiercely at the police officer. Then he directly stood up and strode in front of the police officer. This scared the police officer so much that he quickly retreated. Don't mess around. I can shoot." Suzuki was expressionless as he directly walked in front of the police officer. His chest even bumped into the muzzle of the police officer's gun. The police officer was so scared that he started to tremble. He had been in this profession for so many years, but other than in school and the shooting club, he had never really fired a gun. Don't force me. I said don't disturb me." The ferocious gaze and frightening roar suddenly scared the police officer to the point that his face turned pale. His mind went blank, and he subconsciously closed his eyes. At the same time, he suddenly raised the hanging gun. Under the pressure and fear, the police officer pulled the trigger. Bang! A gunshot suddenly sounded from the back alley, and then the world seemed to become quiet. The police officer felt that there was a continuous buzzing sound in his ears. He opened his eyes in fear. When he saw that Natsuya Suzuki was still alive and standing in front of him, he subconsciously let out a sigh of relief. However, at the same time, he also saw that there was a bright red bloodstain on Natsuya Suzuki's cheek. The bullet probably grazed his face. The police officer's mind went blank again. At this time, Suzuki stretched out his hand and touched his cheek. Then he directly stretched out his hand and grabbed the police officer's hand that was holding the gun and forcefully twisted it. Ah! The police officer screamed and retreated. But because he was too nervous, the police officer suddenly fell to the ground, but his gun had fallen into Natsuya Suzuki's hand. The police officer climbed up from the ground in a panic, turned around, and ran out of the back alley of the disco bar without thinking. Only Natsuya Suzuki and the frightened employee of the disco bar were left. Now, can you tell me why I killed the manager? Natsuya Suzuki walked in front of the employee, and his gaze moved down. Number 28, this is the place, right? Suzuki raised his head and looked at the building in front of him. The address in his hand was written by the employee of the disco bar, so it should be correct. I don't know anything, but someone told me that if you want to know, you have to go to this address. So, after casually beating up this former coworker, Suzuki directly found the address. Because he missed the bus stop midway, Suzuki didn't arrive at the address until 9 p.m. Room 709, this is the place. Shiongi? Suzuki looked at the surname in front of the room number with some surprise. This was the manager's surname. He seemed to have heard the manager say that he lived nearby. Could this be the manager's home? Is anyone home? Suzuki pressed the doorbell, but after waiting for a while, there was no answer. He frowned and reached out to push the door, but found that the door wasn't locked. Excuse me, is anyone home? I'm Suzuki. Excuse me, is anyone home? I'm coming in. Sorry to disturb you. The lights in a room weren't turned on, but Suzuki smelled something very bad. This smell was not unfamiliar to Suzuki. It was the smell of blood. He directly turned on the lights in the room at the entrance. The moment the light filled the room, Suzuki's pupils immediately contracted. In the corridor, on the walls, and even on the ceiling, there were dark red splashes of blood that had already dried. The blood on the floor was probably left behind when someone had crawled. Suzuki took a deep breath. These splashes of blood easily constructed such an image in his mind. How desperate the victim was, crawling in terror towards the house in front of the perpetrator. Suzuki closed his eyes, slowly exhaled, and walked into the room. The living room was a typical small apartment, compact but not cramped, probably because the owner of the house had put a lot of effort into decorating it. But at this time, the living room was unusually messy, and there had probably been a fight. A face that had long since turned pale was now facing Suzuki. It was the corpse of a woman who had been hung from the ceiling of the living room. She was about 40 years old. Her body was full of scratches from the claws of wild beasts. This was a thorough torture. Suzuki sighed again. There were some photos of the family on the cabinet in the living room. Suzuki saw manager Xiongyi, who had taken good care of him in the photos, and also saw the woman who had been tortured to death. She was probably the manager's wife. I'm very sorry. Suzuki knelt down in front of the female corpse, then untied the body from the ceiling. But the moment he untied manager Xiongyi's wife, Suzuki suddenly raised his head. We meet again. Two young men were currently standing in the hallway, leading from the entrance, Kenji and Takashi. Takashi was the one who used Western boxing, and Kenji was the one who had been knocked unconscious by Natsuya Suzuki at the beginning. Now that the two of them were here at the same time, the cause of the tragedy in the house was very clear. Are you surprised? Are you surprised? Kenji leaned against the wall and looked at Natsuya Suzuki with a playful smile. As for Takashi, He was clenching his fists so tightly that his knuckles cracked. I'm really indebted to you for taking care of me last time, but I was just careless last time. I won't let you have an easy time today. Who are you? Natsuya Suzuki only frowned. After putting down the body of the manager's wife, he stood up. The two of them had obviously come with the purpose of seeking revenge. They had wanted to properly take revenge, but they hadn't expected Natsuya Suzuki to directly say, "Who are you?" Which was like letting them punch the air. You forgot? Kenji's face was full of disbelief. Natsuya Suzuki said impatiently, "I beat people up every day. If I could remember every person I beat up, I would have graduated from high school a long time ago." You, Kenji snorted coldly. "It looks like I'll have to help you remember. I'll let you know that we're definitely not to be trifled with, stupid human." With that, Kenji waved his fist and suddenly attacked Natsuya Suzuki. Bang! In a split second, Spiritual Pulse Shia's palm pressed directly on Kenji's head at an even more terrifying speed and directly pushed him to the wall. Kenji's head was directly smashed against the wall by Natsuya Suzuki, and this was the origin of the loud noise. Takashi stared at him with wide eyes. Although he had already mentally prepared himself, this guy was like a wild beast and definitely couldn't be measured by ordinary people. But how did he attack just now? "Do I know you?" While firmly pressing on Kenji's head, Natsuya Suzuki looked directly at Takashi. At this moment, Kenji's eyes had already rolled up and he had already lost consciousness. "Bakayaro, have you forgotten what happened in the disco room?" Takashi cursed angrily at this moment and directly threw a punch. Natsuya Suzuki was motionless at this moment, but the moment Takashi's fist was about to touch him, Suzuki's whole body seemed to have been electrocuted, and he directly punched Takashi's face. With this punch, Takashi's nose was directly broken, and he was beaten to the ground. He saw stars and was in extreme pain and couldn't tell north from south at all. This is what's going on with this guy. How can a human have such powerful physical strength? He's just like a monster. Natsuya Suzuki snorted coldly at this time and directly lifted Takashi up. Then, he clenched his fist and directly punched Takashi's abdomen. With this punch, Takashi felt that his internal organs were all shattered, and he directly spat out a mouthful of blood. However, Natsuya Suzuki had already raised his fist again. "If this goes down, I may die." Takashi's instinct at this moment told him this. He was actually afraid of a human's fist. However, fear really defeated his reason, and he couldn't continue to remain silent. "That child, don't you care about it?" The fist suddenly stopped, less than a centimeter away from Takashi's eyes. Are you afraid?" Takashi sneered at this time. Although the opponent's 2 punches almost took his life, Takashi's heart felt like it had eaten 3 bowls of shaved ice when he saw the opponent's extremely fearful expression at this time. "What a cute child. This is the child of this family," Takashi said triumphantly at this time. "We knew you would definitely come to the manager of the disco bar." Young Master Fong said that if you want to save this child, you have to be prepared to suffer a fate worse than death. Ha ha ha. "Who cares? Go to hell." Bang! The fist that stopped started again. It was less than a centimeter away, but with Natsuya Suzuki's full strength, Takashi was still sent flying by this punch. You really don't care about that child's life or death." Takashi got up with difficulty at this time, his face covered in blood. Natsuya Suzuki quickly walked in front of Takashi and punched him again and again. "Take me to Manager Xiong Ye's child, you bastard. You're still hitting. If you kill me, that child will also be buried with me. Then you go downstairs and wait for him." Natsuya Suzuki didn't care about this kind of threat at all, and his punches were heavier and heavier. "You don't hit me. Don't hit me." Chapter 964. It was very cold, so cold that he could see white mist when he exhaled, and it was also raining. There were many pedestrians on the streets, probably because it was the weekend, even if it was raining now. Men, women, boyfriends, and girlfriends. Probably more than 10 years ago, he had also been like this, very keen to show off his youth on the streets. "Youth," Xiong Yi suddenly sighed with emotion. Hubby, are you listening?" He was actually on his way home from work. Xiongyi had been on the phone with his wife the entire time. They mainly talked about trivial things in life. In addition, because of the weather these past few days, his child, who had just started primary school, had some breathing problems. When he was born, the child had been born with asthma, which he had inherited from his mother. Although his wife was nagging, so many years had passed, and Xiongyi had long become accustomed to his wife's nagging. Or rather, if there was a day when he didn't hear it, he would always feel a little unaccustomed. "How about we go to Hokkaido next month?" Xiongyi said into the phone. "It's been a long time since we went on a family trip together, right? Do you have any vacations? But if you really want to go to Hokkaido, then you have to prepare well. If it's still too cold then, I'm worried that the child's body won't be able to take it. It's okay. I always feel like we'll get lucky." Xiongyi smiled, but suddenly stopped in his tracks. On the other end of the phone, his wife was still talking and nagging nonstop. "Hubby, you're not listening again?" "Ah, sorry, I saw someone over here." Xiongyi hurriedly responded to his wife. "Li Zi, I'll call you back later. There's something here." Xiongyi quickly turned off the phone and looked somewhere on the side of the road. It was in front of the door of a snack shop. The owner of the snack shop might have gone out because the shop's door was closed. At this time, a man was squatting in front of the door. The man was squatting on the ground, hugging his knees and burying his head between his knees. He was dressed very thinly, and there was a suitcase next to him. "Are you okay?" Xiongyi walked over, one hand on his knees, and bent down. At the same time, he held the umbrella in his hand and leaned forward. He raised his head and opened his eyes slightly, like a person who had been awakened from his sleep. "Are you okay?" Xiongyi asked again. It took a while for the other party to regain his senses. He blinked his eyes and asked, "Uncle, do I know you?" "This isn't a question of whether I know him or not, right?" Xiongyi shook his head. "You're here alone in this kind of weather, and you're wearing so little. You'll more or less be a little curious." "Ah, it's raining. When did it?" The man looked at the rain in surprise. Xiongyi opened his mouth. This guy couldn't have frozen his brain, right? But at this moment, something rushed out of the man's arms. It was a cat. The cat came out of the man's clothes and jumped to the ground. Then it quickly rushed to the other side of the road and disappeared. "Your cat ran away. Is it okay?" Xiongyi couldn't help but feel strange when he saw that the man had no intention of chasing after it. "It's not mine." The man shook his head. "I picked her up this morning. She looks like she's about to die. I'll see if I can save her." "Oh, she's quite spirited. This is really good." You haven't been squatting here since this morning, have you?" Xiongyi asked in surprise. "Yeah. Is there a problem?" The man looked puzzled. "Are you an idiot? It's just a cat. Maybe it's even a stray." Xiongyi couldn't help but frown. Unexpectedly, the man suddenly stood up and put on a fierce look, scaring Xiongyi into backing away. What do you want to do? You're the idiot? I've already graduated from junior high school." The man roared loudly. "Huh!" Xiongyi was a little caught off guard. Unexpectedly, the man's roar was so loud that everyone on the street could hear him. In an instant, low, amused laughter came from everywhere. The man probably still had some sense of shame. Seeing this, he glared fiercely at the crowd. It had to be said that although this man was handsome, his eyes were really scary when he glared like a beast. The crowd dispersed. The man snorted coldly and no longer paid attention to Xiongyi. Instead, he picked up the luggage bag on the ground. At that moment, the man's stomach suddenly rumbled. The man rubbed his stomach, then reached into his trouser pocket and dug around a few times before taking his hand out. When he opened it up, there were only a few coins left. The man swallowed, then sighed and stuffed the coins back into the bag. He took a deep breath and prepared to leave. "Do you want to eat some?" Suddenly, the man heard Xiongye's voice. He subconsciously looked at the middle-aged man, only to see the middle-aged man pointing at a shop across the road. The middle-aged man then made a drinking gesture and smiled. "If you don't mind, please have a drink with me." "Ha ha ha, running away from home. You're so young, Suzuki." It was probably because people at this age began to talk more after a few drinks. The atmosphere in teppanyaki shops was almost always like this. Xiongyi already knew that the other person's name was Suzuki. Running away from home because of a quarrel with his family, this kind of thing was actually very common. Running away from home. I did this when I was a kid, too. Xiongyi touched the wine glass and said with some nostalgia. Uncle, did you try it too? Suzuki looked up curiously. Xiongyi waved his hand and said, but I went home after a few days. Actually, home is still better. Suzuki didn't say anything. He just lowered his head and silently ate the third serving of teppanyaki that had just been served, which was still steaming hot. So, you don't have anywhere to go now? Xiongyi burped and suddenly asked. Suzuki looked up slightly, shook his head, and lowered his head again to eat in big mouthfuls. Xiongyi smiled. Hey, do you want me to introduce you to a job for the time being? Me? Suzuki looked up in surprise. Didn't you run away from home? Since you ran away from home, that means you really need to be self-reliant. In that case, you can't not look for a job. How about it? I'll be a waiter at a disco bar. I'll give you an hourly wage. Do you want it? I'll do it. Suzuki nodded vigorously and kept nodding. The name was Takizawa, and there was a huge sign above his head. Natsuya Suzuki frowned. This place was much bigger than his home. As for the specific value, he was too lazy to estimate it. Kenji and Gao Ji were very sensible and didn't say anything provocative at this time, because the two of them had really been taught a lot by this monstrous man on the way here. The two of them already had a tacit understanding that they weren't in a hurry to get revenge. No matter how strong this man was, he was just like a child in the Takizawa family. The two of them weren't real members of the Takizawa family. Only young Master Phone was. In the Takizawa family, Kenji and Gao Ji were probably equivalent to servants. Only people with the surname Takizawa had incredible power that the outside world didn't know about. Of course, Kenji and Gao Ji also had the opportunity to have this kind of power, as long as they were chosen by the Takizawa family to receive a baptism. This was why the two of them were willing to serve young Master Phone. The child is inside? Natsuya Suzuki frowned at this time. He had a beast-like intuition. This intuition made him feel uncomfortable just standing in front of this door. Yes, the child is inside, in young Master Feng's courtyard. Gao Ji sneered. You'd better hurry up. Otherwise, even if you see it, I'm afraid it'll only be a corpse. I'll find a good place to bury the child. Suzuki nodded and said very seriously, then I'll let you accompany him by his side. That's letting you off easy. Gao Ji and Kenji's expressions suddenly became unsightly. This guy was simply a beast that didn't know how to think. If you have the ability, then go in. Kenji raised his voice and suddenly opened a small side door next to the Takizawa family's main door. The moment the side door opened, Kenji and Gao Ji suddenly rushed in. They were so fast that even Suzuki couldn't react in time. Suzuki stared blankly, then walked in through the side door, but there was no trace of Kenji and Gao Ji. Where are they? Suzuki frowned. At this moment, something directly fell towards Natsuya Suzuki from above. It turned out to be a huge net. Not only that, but there were also several big men holding onto the corners of this big net at the same time. Even with Natsuya Suzuki's monstrous strength, he couldn't tear this big net apart for a while. On the contrary, several big men were pulling the big net and completely controlling Natsuya Suzuki's movements. So, you're really an idiot. Since you have the guts to break into the Takizawa family's house, we'll definitely treat you well. In the dark, Kenji walked out with a sneer and put on a pair of sharp brass knuckles on his finger. Natsuya Suzuki suddenly stopped struggling and looked up at the front. In front of him, there were overlapping buildings, one after another, towering like mountains. And at the top, there was something like a castle. This Takizawa family's house is really big. Deep in the mountains, the Takizawa family was more like a huge village than a home. There were all kinds of buildings wrapped in a huge wall. The car entered from the outermost gate, and then they had to walk along the mountain road for a while to reach the Takizawa family's main house, the ancient castle on top of the mountains. Of course, there were already many luxurious buildings on the road, as expected of an ancient family with a huge influence on the country's politics. Haruko Suzuki coldly looked at the place under the mountain that could be called Takizawa Village. Father, are the people living here all from the Takizawa family? Haruko Suzuki asked curiously at this time. Yuichi Suzuki said, "Not really. Only a few of the Takizawa family's collateral relatives live here, and the rest are the servants' families. The Takizawa family's rules are very strict. Even the direct relatives will be expelled if they don't have enough talent. On the contrary, if there is a talented person in the collateral relatives, they will be promoted to the main family." Haruko Suzuki nodded. Soon after, the car stopped in front of the castle. "It's already very late. It's almost 12 o'clock. It seems that I have to postpone my plan to see Natsuya Suzuki tonight and fulfill Haruko Suzuki's wish." Hakata thought for a while and decided to spend more time tonight to study the details of the Takizawa family. Because from the moment he entered the mountain gate, he had an uncomfortable feeling this place was not as simple as it looked. Although it's very obscure, there seems to be some kind of cold power in it. Perhaps it's still far from when you and I were at our peak, but now, it's better to be careful. In the dark, Lien Jun's voice suddenly sounded. Haruko Suzuki secretly glanced at his shadow and then nodded. At this time, the gate opened and an old man slowly walked out, followed by two young girls in kimonos. Yuichi Suzuki whispered in his son's ear, "This is Takizawa Hideo, the butler of the Takizawa family. He can be considered a big shot in the Takizawa family." Haruko Suzuki nodded, and at the same time began to spy on Suzuki Hideo. Of course, as an ancestor who played with souls, his spying methods were naturally very obscure. "Welcome, Master Suzuki." The head butler, Suzuki Hideo, smiled at this time and very humbly bowed. Yuichi Suzuki also returned a bow, and then said politely, "It's a pleasure to meet you again, Butler Takizawa. You're too kind." Takizawa Hideo smiled faintly. Although his hair was white, his body seemed to be quite strong and healthy. But at this time, a clang sound suddenly came from the foot of the mountain. Yuichi Suzuki and Haruko Suzuki looked at it curiously. This sound seemed to be like the sound of a night watch. It's probably some unknown little thief who broke in. It's okay. The guards will take care of it. Don't worry, the two of you." Takizawa Hideo said very casually. "Someone actually dares to break in here?" Haruko Suzuki asked curiously. Takizawa Hideo was not displeased by such a question. It was as if this kind of question was allowed. Therefore, the head butler of the Takizawa family smiled warmly and said, "There are all kinds of curious people, and among them, there are also some who came with bad intentions. The two clangs just now mean that it's a normal incident, and it will be resolved soon. So that's how it is." Suzuki-chun, Xin nodded. Unexpectedly, just as this conversation finished, three more clang sounds suddenly came from the foot of the mountain. Chapter 965. But Takizawa Hideo's expression quickly returned to normal, and he quickly invited Yuichi Suzuki and Haruko Suzuki into the main castle of the Takizawa family. Along the way, Suzuki's father and son realized how big the Takizawa family was. In this modern society, the fact that Takizawa's family still kept the rules of the ancient society made people feel some of the horror of this family. Suzuki's father and son were arranged to wait in a quiet room. As for the housekeeper, Takizawa Hideo, he left, saying that he was going to call the main family to discuss this cooperation. "The last time we met, I only saw Takizawa Hideo, but this time, the main family is here. It seems that the Takizawa family is very serious about this exploration of the imperial tombs," Yuichi Suzuki said in a low voice. Haruko Suzuki's expression naturally became serious. The father and son began to discuss some countermeasures when facing the Takizawa family. Haruko Suzuki's shadow, which was elongated by the light, suddenly shook, and a small black shadow quickly left the shadow and disappeared. But at this time, the sound of the night watch came from outside again. If you remember correctly, this time it was a total of 4 times. "Miss Laura, the head and heir of the Suzuki family are here." After Takizawa Hideo settled the father and son of the Suzuki family, he quickly walked into a room deep in the castle. The room was luxuriously decorated, and the floor was covered with snow-white blankets. At the same time, more than 10 handsome young men were crawling on the floor. Without exception, they were all wearing shorts, blindfolds, and mouthpieces. They seemed to have lost their humanity and were subdued to the bottom of the earth like animals. The seductive woman at the front was holding a long whip, lying on the bed, and drinking a cup of dark red liquid. I've heard that the young master of the Suzuki family is very strong. He's even bragged that he's the strongest man in the world, right? The seductive woman, named Takizawa Laura, giggled. The one who came this time is not Natsuya Suzuki, but Haruxin Suzuki. Takizawa Hideo lowered his head and said, I heard that Natsuya Suzuki ran away from home not long ago, and he hasn't been found yet. Is that so? That's a pity. Laura shook her head, and the whip in her hand mercilessly lashed at a young man beside her. She then said, What about this Haruxin Suzuki? He's a very gentle person, like a gentleman. Takizawa Hideo whispered. I've raised enough of this type. Luala yawned, then stretched and stood up. Let's go meet this Suzuki Yuichi. My brother recently went to South America. Otherwise, I wouldn't have to do such a troublesome thing. Miss Laura, do you want to have lunch before you go? The butler asked respectfully. Laura's gaze shifted, and she suddenly smiled and said, Lunch? Let's see what this Haruxin Suzuki is like. However, at this moment, there was a sudden clanging sound. Laura said unhappily, Butler, this is the third time, right? Are the guards so useless? Or are the invaders difficult to deal with this time? Are there any exorcists in this country who dare come? Takizawa Hideo frowned at the same time. I've already investigated after the second alarm. This incident seems to be caused by a collateral relative called Takizawa Kid. But this is the third alarm. The fourth watch, that's the level of an exorcist. A collateral relative? Has he been baptized? Takizawa Hideo said, Yes, he's been baptized, but he's not qualified to receive limbo. Laura snorted coldly. Let the guards of the main family deal with it. After this matter is settled, get rid of this Takizawa Kid as well. The Takizawa family doesn't need incompetent and troublesome people. Yes, the Black Shadow walked through the ancient castle of the Takizawa family. Because it didn't have a physical body, it could easily pass through walls one after another. Naturally, some secret places couldn't escape its prying eyes. It was Lien Jun who had signed a contract with Hakata. At this moment, the Black Shadow stopped in a special room in the ancient castle. The reason why this room was special was because there were young women hanging here. They were neatly arranged, their clothes had been taken off, and all of them had lost their consciousness, but they were still alive. However, some of these women were already emaciated, as if they had been drained of their life force. Many tubes were inserted into each woman's body, and a special container was placed under their feet. It seemed to be collecting the blood of these women. Lien Jun could see that each container was marked with a special number. Even though Lien Jun didn't mind killing, he couldn't help but frown when he saw this situation. What's going on with the Takizawa family? It's so evil. At this moment, a voice suddenly came from outside the room. Lien Jun's whole body suddenly went through the wall, and he saw two men in black kimonos guarding the door of this special room in the corridor. At this moment, another man in a black kimono with a katana walked in and said in a low voice, Miss Laura ordered the guards to attack. The level 4 alarm has been sounded outside. Ryosuke, accompany me to join the team. Okay, Captain. Then, there was only one man left guarding here. Lien Jun pondered for a moment and decided to follow the captain to find out what was going on. Bang! A young man's body violently broke the door of a big house. At this time, on the main street of the Takizawa family's village, more than a dozen men in special clothes were nervously looking at a young man. The intruder this time, for the time being, they did not know where the intruder came from. They only knew that he had fought his way in from the third entrance. Out of the 60 guards, only a dozen of them were left. The rest were lying on the ground on the way in. The young man's face was gloomy, and there were many wounds on his body. They were the finished products of the guard along the way, and they risked their lives to leave these wounds on the young man's body. But these wounds couldn't stop the Azura-like man. At this time, the young man's hand was holding the neck of a servant named Takashi, and he dragged him all the way. As for the servant named Kenji, who was just thrown out by the young man. This is young Master Feng's house. The guards watched in astonishment as the young man walked into the mansion without the slightest scruple. Bastard, get out here! But before the guards could react, the roar of the intruder came from the big house. They didn't care whether they offended the intruder or not, so they could only brace themselves and rush into the big house. It seemed that young Master Feng, who lived there, was also famous for his love of torturing and killing women outside. Could it be that this was the reason for the trouble this time? No matter whether it was or not, the intruder must be killed. This was the iron law of the Takizawa family. When the guards finally found the young man's back, they also saw the owner of the big house, young Master Takizawa Kid. I can't believe we let this guy barge into my house. Is the current security force so useless? Takizawa Kid was leaning against a pillar in the corridor, holding a sharp katana in his hand, but the blade of the katana was still dripping with blood. After being reprimanded by the young master of the side branch, the faces of the guards immediately turned ugly. But the young man didn't care. He directly threw Gao Ji in his hand towards Takizawa Kid. Hey, green hair, quickly hand over the manager's son. Kid Takizawa snorted coldly and waved his katana, cutting Gao Ji into two halves. Gao Ji didn't even have the chance to make a sound before he died. Useless thing. Takizawa Kid walked down the stairs and looked at the young man in front of him. I heard that your name is Suzuki. You really are a monster. But this is as far as I can go. I told you to hand over the kid, bastard. Didn't you hear me? The young man, Suzuki, widened his eyes and reached out to grab Takizawa Kid. But when he rushed in front of Takizawa Kid disappeared. Natsuya Suzuki felt like he was being stared at by a poisonous snake. He instinctively took a step forward, but at the same time, he felt a sharp pain on his back. There was a bright red cut on his back. Blood was gushing out like a fountain. This was the wound caused by Takizawa Kid's katana. You really have a monstrous reflex. Takizawa Kid had a mocking smile on his face. Then he waved his katana, causing the blood stains on it to fall off. Takizawa Kid's eyes flashed red from time to time, and some blood-red steam was faintly emitted from his body, giving people a very strange feeling. Young Master Kid must have taken a secret medicine to temporarily increase his strength. A guard suddenly said in a low voice. Takizawa Kid suddenly looked at him with a cold gaze and snorted coldly, scaring the guard so much that he quickly shrank his head. Nobody can tell anyone about what happened today. Takizawa Kid shouted coldly. All the guards were submissive and didn't dare to utter a word. Even if he was just a young master of a branch family, he was still an upper-class person at the foot of the mountain. Natsuya Suzuki gritted his teeth and stood up from the ground. You're really a monster. You only realized it now. Takizawa Kid smiled gloomily. It seems that your brain is not working well. Oh, let me show you something good. Takizawa Kid suddenly waved his hand, and the door of the room in the corridor suddenly opened. In the room, a small figure was hanging on the ceiling. It was a child. The child lowered his head, but his body was badly mutilated. There were cuts all over his body. It was exactly the same miserable situation as the manager's wife. It's beautiful, right? It's so beautiful when he screams. Takizawa Kid was like a drunkard with a weird smile on his face. It's all your fault, Suzuki. It's all your fault. Who told you to beat me? You also ruined my good thing. So it's all because of you. Ha ha ha. Ha. It was a stone that Natsuya Suzuki grabbed when he fell on the ground, but now it was crushed in his palm. But Natsuya Suzuki didn't choose to attack Takizawa Kid. Instead, he turned around and rushed into the room. He directly jumped up, broke the rope that tied the child, and put the child down. The moment he held the child in his arms, Natsuya Suzuki's face suddenly relaxed, because he could feel that the child was still alive. It was good that he was still alive. As long as he was alive, it was a great miracle, a miracle that was worth cherishing. But when Natsuya Suzuki saw the child's face, his pupils instantly widened. The child's mouth was full of blood, his teeth were knocked out, and his eyes were dug out. You want to save a child? Takizawa Keed sneered. Sure, but even if I save him, it will only be more painful. Ha ha ha. I'll kill you. Natsuya Suzuki suddenly stood up, expressionless like a pool of stagnant water, and walked toward Takizawa Keed step by step. Takizawa Keed wasn't afraid, but held the hilt with both hands, probably the starting stance of a certain kendo school. It seems that you still don't understand the gap between you and me. Today I'm different from that day. Don't you understand? You talk too much. Natsuya Suzuki punched at Takizawa Keed, but Takizawa Keed easily dodged it. Too slow. Takizawa Keed had already flashed behind Natsuya Suzuki, and then mercilessly chopped down with his katana. Unexpectedly, at this moment, Natsuya Suzuki also turned around and, at the same time, grabbed the katana's blade. The blade easily cut open Natsuya Suzuki's palm, but at the same time, it was tightly held by Natsuya Suzuki's palm. Takizawa Keed couldn't pull out for a moment. You bastard. Before Takizawa Keed could finish his sentence, there was already a fist in front of him. Natsuya Suzuki's way of solving problems was always with his fists. The power of this fist seemed to contain the power of God, and the fist faintly emitted traces of black fog. Bang! What surprised and frightened Takizawa Keed was that this fist caused him pain. It was very painful, so painful that he felt like he was going to die. Natsuya Suzuki's fist smashed Takizawa Keed to the ground. The moment Takizawa Keed landed, it was like the head of a pile driver hitting the ground, and the entire courtyard shook. Young Master Foam. The members of the garrison shouted together and rushed forward, but it was all too late because Natsuya Suzuki directly grabbed the katana from Takizawa Keed's hand, and without saying anything, he turned the tip of the katana and stabbed it toward Takizawa Keed's throat. In the blink of an eye, the crisp sound of metal colliding rang out. Let's stop here. Natsuya Suzuki's katana was blocked by an iron rod. Natsuya Suzuki suddenly raised his head, and his beast-like eyes shot out. The person holding the iron rod looked into Natsuya Suzuki's eyes, and his heart trembled subconsciously. He thought to himself, what a ferocious gaze. I'll kill you too. Natsuya Suzuki suddenly stood up, but the moment he stood up, Natsuya Suzuki's expression became stiff, because at this moment, two different but equally sharp blades suddenly shot out from his chest. The blades crossed in front of Natsuya Suzuki's chest, obviously because the angle of the blades on his back was different. I said stop here, didn't you hear, intruder? The two different blades were fiercely pulled out from Natsuya Suzuki's body. Natsuya Suzuki finally spat out a mouthful of blood and slowly turned around. He saw two men in black kimonos behind him. They were holding katanas in their hands. Ah, it's our family's guards, the members of the guards exclaimed. But Natsuya Suzuki acted as if he didn't hear them, and suddenly raised his fist like a mad lion. But he ignored the man holding the iron rod behind him. The iron rod, at this moment, mercilessly smashed the back of Natsuya Suzuki's head from top to bottom. This fierce attack directly smashed Natsuya Suzuki's head, and the whole thing changed. Natsuya Suzuki slowly fell to the ground. His body twitched a few times and then stopped moving. What a terrifying guy. One of the men in black kimono slowly put away his katana, glanced at Natsuya Suzuki, and then bowed politely. He's also a respectable man. Please excuse my rudeness. After that, the man directly walked to Takizawa Keed, looked down, and said indifferently, Take Takizawa Keed back. Yes, Captain. The man holding the iron rod and the other young man nodded at the same time. At this moment, Takizawa Keed's face had changed shape, and he was spitting out mouthfuls of blood, unable to speak. The captain looked at the members of the guards and said indifferently, Go and clean up the outside before dawn. The captain frowned because the guards in front of him all showed a strange look and looked at the back of the captain. The captain abruptly turned around. Natsuya Suzuki, who was lying on the ground, suddenly trembled and then slowly got up. His body was constantly emitting a large amount of black smoke. Ah, what a terrible holiday. Chapter 966. Takizawa Laura was a woman with a strong aura. Judging from her age, she was about 26 or 27 years old. She wore a long red dress with a black mole at the corner of her mouth. Her eyes were sharp. The person sent by the Takizawa family to discuss this matter was not as easy to deal with as expected. Even so, Yuichi Suzuki was neither servile nor overbearing. The reason why the Suzuki Kai in the Kanto region was able to grow and squeeze out many old forces was because of Yuichi Suzuki as the head of the Suzuki Kai. Miss Laura, regarding the manpower for the excavation of the Imperial Tomb, there is no problem at all. Yuichi Suzuki looked straight into Takizawa Laura's eyes. But I hope to have a certain degree of command when it comes to the allocation of personnel. This kind of ancient tomb is bound to hide unknown dangers. I don't want to take the risk like this. Miss Laura? Miss Laura? But Yuichi Suzuki found that the young lady from the Takizawa family did not seem to pay attention to him. Perhaps she did not listen carefully to what he said. Instead, she kept looking at her son, Haruxin Suzuki. This woman's eyes were full of lust. It could be seen that she was the kind of person who was full of lust. However, Harum Suzuki was sitting upright with an aloof look on her face. Under Takizawa Laura's greedy gaze, she did not waver in the slightest. While Yuichi Suzuki secretly praised her, he was also a little dissatisfied with the Takizawa family. Although the Suzuki Kai could not be compared with the giants like the Takizawa family sent such a woman to negotiate. It was a little too contemptuous. Oh, I'm listening again. You can continue. Takizawa Laura smiled, but her eyes still did not leave Haruko Suzuki. What's your name? Chun Xin, Haruxin Suzuki. Haruko Suzuki glanced at Takizawa Laura. It smelled a strong smell of blood from this woman. As an ancestor that toyed with souls, it could easily see how much resentment was wrapped around the woman. If an ordinary person was wrapped in so much resentment, they would have long fallen ill, but the woman was completely fine. Clearly, she was not an ordinary person. Chuanshin, what a good name. Takizawa Aurora narrowed her eyes slightly. She suddenly reached out and lifted Chuanshin Suzuki's chin with her finger. Do you know that you're going to stay here for the rest of your life? Haruko Suzuki frowned slightly. It wasn't because of Takizawa Laura's desire, nor was it because of the fact that she was going to stay. It was because of Lien Jun. Lien Jun had an inseparable contractual relationship with it, and at this moment, Lien Jun had sent it some kind of message. It was something extremely dangerous, something that even Lien Jun, who had once dominated the slaughter, was terrified of. Clang, 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 clang. She had lost count of how many times she had heard this sound. At this moment, a series of dense noises suddenly came from outside the castle. At this moment, Takizawa Aurora suddenly stood up, walked to the door, and pushed it open. At this moment, what Takizawa Aurora saw was a soaring fire. Below the castle, the entire Takizawa family village was now in a raging fire. What the hell happened? Not far away, the chief butler Takizawa Hideo quickly walked over and said with a solemn expression, Miss Laura, a calamity-level incident has occurred. A calamity-level incident was second only to the highest level of alarm set by the Takizawa family, which was the extermination alert. In the history of the Takizawa family, it had only happened twice. Every time, the Takizawa family would suffer great losses, and they would have to spend decades to recover from it. Takizawa Aurora's expression changed dramatically. Damn it, what did this kid from the collateral branch do to me? Is it you bunch of trash that woke me up? The black fog was like a burning flame. In this fog, Natsuya Suzuki, who should have been smashed in the head by the guards of the Takizawa family, walked out unscathed. This was no longer a matter of his recovery ability. It was as if he had completely changed into another person. At this moment, the captain of the guards felt his heart beat wildly. Just one look from this man who walked out of the black fog was enough to make him feel an instinctive fear. He wanted to pull out his sword, but he found that his whole body had become stiff and wouldn't listen to him. It was just that calm look in his eyes. Ew, who the hell are you? The captain of the guards didn't know that he was swallowing his saliva subconsciously. The man in front of him, this Natsuya Suzuki in front of him, tilted his head and looked at the captain of the guards. My name? Let me think. I can't remember it. What? The captain of the guards was stunned. But at this time, another young man of the guards snorted coldly. Oomph. Pretentious guy. This time, I'll cut you into pieces and see if you can still stand up. In a flash, the sharp katana pierced towards Suzuki Shea. Ryosuke, don't be impulsive. The captain of the guard shouted. But it was too late because the young man named Ryosuke had already stabbed Natsuya Suzuki with a katana in his hand. But the sharp katana couldn't pierce Natsuya Suzuki. It couldn't even pierce Natsuya Suzuki's skin. What's more, the katana actually shattered into pieces at this moment. How could this be? The young man named Ryosuke was shocked. It hurts, you bastard. Natsuya Suzuki turned his neck and glared at Ryosuke. At the same time, a fist flew towards Ryosuke's head. It was too fast. It was so fast that Ryosuke couldn't react. He didn't know anything. He couldn't even feel the pain because his thoughts stopped at this moment or disappeared. Ryosuke, the captain of the guards, shouted in grief and indignation. Ryosuke's head was smashed by Natsuya Suzuki. This fist not only smashed Ryosuke's head, but also destroyed a corner of the mansion behind him. It was just the airflow from the fist. I remember Sakata Kinshur. Natsuya Suzuki said slowly. I should be called Sakata Kinshur. When Natsuya Suzuki said this name, those guards who were in a state of panic couldn't think at all. But the captain of the guards opened his mouth with an incredulous expression. Sakata Kinshur? One of the 4 heavenly kings of Ligua, the legendary thunder god Red Dragon's child. Kintaro? Kintaro? Someone did call me that in the past. Natsuya Suzuki patted his head and yawned. Sorry, I just woke up and haven't thought things through. But it doesn't matter. I just want to vent my anger. The captain of the guards took a step back instinctively. The man who called himself Kinshur Sakata revealed a sinister smile. I seem to want to turn all of you into dust in this life. Trash. He threw a punch. A black light flashed in front of his eyes. The front of the fist was completely annihilated, leaving behind only a big hole that was dozens of meters long. And in this big hole, only one figure was still standing with difficulty. The captain of the Takizawa family's guards. At this time, his clothes were torn, and his katana was stuck in the ground, so he couldn't hold on. He looked at the mysterious man named Sakata Kinshur in despair and spat out a mouthful of blood. Takizawa keyed. What did you do to provoke? The captain of the guards spat out another mouthful of blood and then fell to the ground. The moment he fell, the captain of the guards was so tired that even his katana was turned into dust. Kinshur Sakata heaved a sigh of relief and frowned. He turned around and looked at manager Xiongye's child, who had been put down and was on the verge of death. For you, living like this is just pain. Sakata Kinshur walked up to the child, took a deep breath, and reached out to grab the child's neck. I'm sorry, Dad. The child's voice was extremely weak, but Sakata Kinshur could clearly hear the child's voice. Save? Save? The hand that was holding the child suddenly loosened a little. Sakata Kinshur frowned and stared at the child's face that had been gouged out. Even so, you don't want to give up. Save? Save? Then live on. Kinshur Sakata loosened her grip and picked up the child. Even if you can't see, I'll let you feel how this place feels like you. She said calmly, I'll let you feel how this place feels like you. He could feel that the child seemed to have calmed down. So Sakata Kinshur took a soft breath and then looked up at the ancient castle high above the Takizawa family. Because he had been asleep for so long, there were many things that he couldn't remember clearly. But his memory was rapidly recovering, and at the same time, he gradually had an impression of the name Takizawa. The Takizawa family was a vampire clan that had lived in East Asia for a long time. They seemed to have transformed into vampires through a special method, and they had always been discriminated against by orthodox vampires, especially the 13 clans that had always considered themselves orthodox. At this time, Sakata Kinshur lightly snorted and stretched out his hand. The dark clouds in the sky started to swirl, turning into a whirlwind that poured down on Sakata Kinshur. Thunder rumbled within the whirlwind. Finally, the dark clouds dispersed in Sakata Kinshi's hand, revealing a huge golden double-edged axe flickering with lightning. What a filthy clan! At this moment, Sakata Kinshur directly chopped down with the huge axe in his hand. In an instant, the power of lightning and fire tore apart the earth, and lightning and fire shot out from the cracks in the earth, crazily devouring the Takizawa family's village. Kintaro, you woke up too early. At this moment, a soft voice came from midair. Sakata Kinshur abruptly waved the huge golden axe in his hand, hacking toward the source of the voice. The target of Sakata Kinshur is Yuyi, who was floating in midair with her dress fluttering in the wind. Miss Maid of the Club. The huge golden axe was now mixed with the power of lightning, and Sakata Kinshur looked like a crazy warrior who wanted to break the sky. The golden axe easily cut open Miss Maid of the Club, but Sakata Kinshur didn't feel like he had killed her, because what he cut open was just a shadow without a physical body. At this moment, the shadow of Miss Maid, who had been cut open by the huge golden axe, quickly gathered back together. Miss Maid of the Club looked calm as she stretched out one finger towards Sakata Kinshur. Instantly, a black light shot into Sakata Kinshi's forehead. The powerful man who had attracted the power of lightning and fire quieted down in an instant. Yuyi said indifferently, although every Onyx soul will fall into a short period of memory confusion after a holiday, it's still not enough. But if you use this as an excuse to break the rules, I can deduct all your remaining merits. So, have you woken up? At this moment, Sakata Kinshur slowly opened his eyes and stabbed his weapon into the ground. He looked up at Miss Maid in midair and suddenly said, "According to the rules, I'm still on vacation, right? Yuyi-san? There should be about 3 years before your vacation ends." Yuyi nodded and then glanced at the child in Sakata Kinshi's arms. Then Yuyi looked around. She suddenly stretched out her hand as though she was gathering the wind around her. She seemed to be listening to something. "I see." Miss Maid slowly opened her eyes and said indifferently, "The Onyx Soul envoys can do whatever they like during their vacation, as long as they don't betray their master. Well, I'll be here to watch. Don't go too far. After all, we have a new master now." "Oh, that's really..." Sakata Kinshur nodded thoughtfully. After that, Kinshur put down the child in her arms and said indifferently, "I was still thinking about how to deal with this child, but I didn't expect to alarm you. Then, can I ask for your help? As for the cost, just deduct it from my balance." "I see, as you wish." Miss Maid nodded. "Thank you so much." Kinshur Sakata nodded. "My sensei." Chapter 967. It was like a cannonball, or a higher level than a cannonball. Every time Sakata Kinshur jumped and landed, it would be accompanied by a huge shock, thunder, and fire, and the sound of buildings collapsing. The surroundings had been engulfed by thunder and fire, as if it had turned into a sea of fire. Under the effect of the heat, the sparks rose to the sky little by little. And that day, it had already turned into an orange-red color. "It's really violent as always." Miss Servant Girl shook her head slightly. Her body was not here, but on the other side of the ocean, but it didn't mean that she couldn't use some of her powers here. Yuyi looked down at the child, lying flat on the ground. A weak soul fire that was almost extinguished, but unexpectedly, it had a strong will to survive. Yuyi shook her head and said indifferently, "The transformation technology sold from us eventually evolved into your misfortune. Now, just take it as recycling. Let Sakata Kinshur recycle it." Miss Servant Girl's eyes were calm. She slowly squatted down, put her palm on the child's forehead, and whispered, "Body creation." The child's wounds began to heal gradually, and new granulation sprouted quickly. Even the wounds of the dug-out eyes were slowly regenerating at this time. "Let's finish things here as soon as possible." And the messenger Sakata Kinshur, who woke up temporarily. Yuyi was thinking about how to deal with the aftermath a long time ago, Miss Servant Girl asked her new master whether to let the Black Soul envoys on vacation return, because the boss had the right to directly terminate the vacation of the Black Soul envoys. Of course, after the termination, the merits that the Black Soul envoys used to buy the vacation would be returned according to the interest. The master said that it was not necessary, and let the Black Soul envoys return automatically after the vacation was over. When Yi was thinking, she seemed to have noticed something. She tilted her head slightly and looked at the shadow of a building not far away that was being engulfed by the fire. The burning fire here seemed to be suddenly weakened, as if a wind blew and then returned to normal. Miss Servant Girl smiled slightly. It turns out that the two naughty guys who escaped from Yenwuya are here. They seem to be having a good time. With that, Yi didn't continue to pay attention to them and turned to look at the child who was in the process of body creation. Well, how about this? Miss Servant Girl suddenly smiled. There was no doubt that she was a perfectionist. At the same time, a huge golden axe suddenly appeared in the air. It was the one in the hand of Sakata Kinshur, but it was obviously enlarged more than 100 times, with thunder and fire all over it. It directly chopped at the ancient castle of the Takizawa family. Looking at the raging fire, the Takizawa family's business was about to be destroyed. Takizawa Rala frowned, and the butler beside him, Takizawa Hideo's expression was not any better. The lords that Takizawa Hideo mentioned were naturally Takizawa Aurora's elders, the real mainstay of the Takizawa family, the first ancestor who was transformed into a vampire using a special method. In order to complete the transformation of life, this ancestor had been sleeping under the ancient castle of the Takizawa family, and every moment the Takizawa family would provide a huge amount of fresh blood for this ancestor. There was a blood supply room in the ancient castle specially built for this ancestor, and every day, blood would be continuously sent to the place where the ancestor was sleeping. Now, the blood accumulated in the place where the ancestor was sleeping had already turned into pure liquid energy, like a blood pool. Hearing Takizawa Hideo's words, Takizawa Aurora bit her thumbnail hard, as if she was hesitating about something. But at this time, a huge thunder and fire axe suddenly appeared in the sky. Damn it! Takizawa Aurora and Takizawa Hideo's expressions changed drastically when they saw the huge thunder and fire axe coming down. Yuichi Suzuki, who was behind the two of them, was already pale with fright at this doomsday-like scene. If it weren't for the fact that he was also someone who had been through a lot and was able to remain calm in the face of something big, he was afraid that he would have already been defeated. Even so, Yuichi Suzuki was drenched in cold sweat, and his mind was blank. This was not something that a human could fight against. Chun Xen, Chun. Yuichi Suzuki subconsciously turned around and saw that the Haruko Suzuki he had brought with him had disappeared without a trace. In the blink of an eye, the 100-meter-long thunder and fire axe had already broken through the top floor of the ancient castle and directly split the side of the ancient castle into two halves. Rumble. The ancient castle was split into two halves, and one side collapsed directly. This luxurious building that stood tall here welcomed its final moment. At the moment when the castle collapsed, a huge red light beam suddenly shot out from the depths of the ancient castle. At this moment, a dozen or so figures flew out from the depths of the castle along the blood-red light pillar. These dozen or so people who had appeared all had ashen faces, green faces, and long fangs. Their appearances were ugly, and their bodies emitted a bloody aura. Its father and the others. In the rubble, Takizawa Aurora pressed one hand on her shoulder and stood up with difficulty. At the moment when the huge thunder and fire axe came down, she instinctively grabbed the housekeeper beside her to block it. The housekeeper's body instantly turned into ashes in the terrifying golden light. But thanks to this, Takizawa Aurora had a slight chance to escape. At this moment, a dozen elders of the Takizawa clan landed on the top of the remaining half of the castle with solemn expressions and looked at Sakata Kinshur, who was carrying a huge axe in midair. Among them, an old man with a withered face said in a deep voice, "Experts from afar, why did you attack our Takizawa clan? If our clan has offended you in any way, We can. However, before the old man could finish his sentence, Sakata Kinshur suddenly extended a finger and tapped the old man in the air. A golden light beam shot out from his finger and directly blew up the old man's head. Seeing the old man's remaining body fall into the castle fire, the elders of the Takizawa clan who came out from the depths of the castle changed their expressions dramatically. "You're so annoying." Sakata Kinshur waved the golden axe in his hand and rushed over. "Today I'm going to wipe out your clan. I said I'll wipe out your clan. So I'll wipe out your clan. Why are you talking so much nonsense? You've gone too far." A dozen elders of the Takizawa clan roared, and their bodies swelled in an instant, turning into huge leeches. Their appearance could no longer be described with the word terrifying. Ugly. They were as ugly as humanoid leeches. A bunch of trash. Sakata Kinshur didn't even look at them. He just waved the huge axe in his hand and pulled it horizontally, and 7 heads of humanoid leeches floated in the air. As for the rest, they were directly chopped in half at the waist. A dozen elders of the Takizawa clan were killed with one swing of the axe, and Sakata Kinshur didn't even bother to wave it a second time. At this moment, Takizawa Aurora, who had just escaped from the rubble, fell to the ground as if her soul had been sucked out of her body. She was terrified. He hugged his body tightly with both hands in fear, trembling and shivering. What kind of joke is this? How is this a calamity-level event? This is clearly a genocide-level event. The mainstays of the Takizawa clan, the elders whom she had relied on, were now smashed into pieces and fell from the sky. Takizawa Aurora suddenly grasped her face with both hands, her eyes wide open, and then she screamed, a scream of horror and despair. "Is there one more?" Bang! Sakata Kinshur landed directly on the ground. His body seemed to be full of mass, and the moment he landed, it was like a thunder hammer hitting the ground. "Don't come over!" Takizawa Aurora shook her head in horror, kicking her legs to move back. "Don't come over! Don't come over! No! No!" Sakata Kinshur didn't even bother to wave his axe. He just slowly raised his hand and pointed his finger, and a flash of lightning and fire suddenly condensed at his fingertip. "No!" Takizawa Aurora let out an unprecedentedly loud cry. At this moment, Sakata Kinshur suddenly pointed his finger in another direction, and a flash of lightning and fire directly shot out. It swept over Takizawa Aurora's head. It didn't attack her, but behind her, Takizawa Aurora trembled and turned his neck with difficulty. He saw a red light shining behind him. The light of the thunder and fire seemed to have encountered something difficult to deal with. At this moment, it was jumping around in the red light, making crackling sounds. Finally, the red light suddenly expanded and directly dispelled the flash of lightning and fire. At the same time, a strong and nauseating smell of blood spread out, like a blood fog. In the blood fog, an unusually seductive boy of 16 or 17 years old slowly walked out. His face was unusually pale. His naked upper body was covered with patterns that flickered with a red light like a spell. "Ancestor!" Longzarala cried out in surprise at this moment. Without caring about his manners, he crawled in front of this seductive youth. "Ancestor! Ancestor!" "I know, be quiet." The boy nodded and waved his hand to calm Takizawa Aurora down. Then he looked at Sakata Kinshur and frowned. "I've heard of this power of lightning and fire. The descendant of Red Dragon, the Thunder God. Why do you want to kill all my descendants?" "Oh, I know there must be a big guy hiding here." "Then it's you." Sakata Kinshur rested his huge axe on his shoulder and showed a ferocious look. "Hey, come over here and die. My time is precious, and I don't want to waste it on a piece of trash like you." The charming young man's expression was calm as he slowly said, "I can feel the majestic and terrifying power in your body. If you want, you can probably turn me into ashes with a snap of your fingers." "Ancestor!" Takizawa Aurora was shocked, but the seductive boy pretended not to hear him and continued indifferently. "But my master is also the child of Taboo of the vampire clan. Your Excellency, please consider whether you really want to exterminate my Takizawa clan." The consequences may not be something you can bear. What? Sakata Kinshur showed a look of disgust. Vampire clan? Those stinky bats? I killed many of them 100 years ago who reneged on their debts. You talk too much. Go to hell. Sakata Kinshur punched out in the air. The seductive boy's expression changed greatly, and without thinking, he turned into a flash of red light and soared into the sky. However, Kinshiro Sakata swung his golden axe, and a crescent-shaped bolt of lightning shot up into the sky, instantly slicing the red light in half. The ancestor of the Takizawa clan was cut in half and fell from the sky. Vampire clans had special senses. At this moment, Takizawa Aurora was filled with grief because the source of his bloodline had disappeared. Such a powerful ancestor, who had existed for hundreds of years. Actually, Takizawa Aurora could no longer think as he sat there like an empty shell. He stared blankly at Sakata Kinshur walking towards him, and that golden axe. A beautiful head fell to the ground at this moment. After rolling a few times, the hair had already covered the once enchanting face. But Sakata Kinshur kicked it away as if it was a football. He looked around, and with the special sensing ability of the Black Soul Envoy, he could confirm that all the living beings with the same aura as the Takizawa clan had been exterminated. Exterminating the clan was not just a joke. There were still some weak life forces in the surroundings, but Sakata Kinshur obviously did not intend to pay attention to them. He picked up his huge axe and turned to leave. By the way, that guy could be considered as my younger brother, although he's a little stupid. Unexpectedly, Sakata Kinshur suddenly turned around and said, "But he's still my younger brother, understand?" Amidst the rubble, Haruna Suzuki slowly walked out from a broken wall. She braced herself and said, "I'm just temporarily possessing her. Look, Haruna Suzuki's consciousness is still fine. I haven't touched her. Don't think that you can be unscrupulous just because you know how to play with souls." Sakata Kinshur snorted coldly. "We are the real masters of souls." Therefore, Sakata Kintoki immediately jumped down the mountain after saying that. At the same time, Yamata Noroki, who had shrunk into Haruxan Suzuki's body, breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, I was too weak to swallow Haruxan Suzuki at first, so I left her consciousness behind. All of a sudden, Yamata's serpent felt that the Lord's present world was also this dangerous, seneschal. "I'm done." Kinshur Sakata slowly walked over, and the huge axe had already disappeared. We saw the servant girl. Sakata Kinshur was obviously not fierce. "Just in time. I've completed your request." Yui smiled and stood up. Behind her, there was a child floating in the air. The child was wearing a pure white robe, and there was not a single scar on his delicate face. Sakata Kintoshi immediately whistled. The servant girl suddenly said, "Since you didn't have any specific request, I created the body according to my own preferences. The child's current body is based on a low-level angel. In addition, the child's original eyes are gone, so I installed Medusa's eyes. In addition, the child lost too much blood, so I replaced the blood with Fafner's blood." And when Yui said that she didn't have any specific request, Sakata Kinshi's face fell. When he heard that strange things were integrated into the child's body, Sakata Kinshur felt like he was being pressed down by a heavy mountain. Then, he swallowed his saliva. "The cost, what did you say? It will be deducted from your performance." The servant girl smiled. "After all the deductions, congratulations, you have 10 performance points left. So ruthless." Chapter 968. The fire seemed to have weakened a little, but the surroundings were still red. Haruko Suzuki lifted a collapsed pillar and squatted down. A guy in a black kimono was lying here. He should have been crushed here after receiving the impact of the collapse of the ancient castle. The body was cold, but considering that the Takizawa clan members were cold-blooded animals, it was impossible to guess the time of his death. However, this was not very important to Haruko Suzuki. What was important was that the soul of the dead Takizawa clan member had not completely disappeared. The remaining soul power was a delicious food for Haruko Suzuki. Hakata's soul was severely damaged, and the easiest way to recover was to devour other souls. What a pity. Those guys hiding in the Takizawa clan were killed in seconds, not leaving a single bit of soul power. Otherwise, they would be a great tonic. Not Suki Suzuki shook her head. Although she felt that it was a pity at this moment, she obviously wouldn't shout at the murderer because of this. Brother Lianjun. Haruko Suzuki turned around and shouted. A shadow was suspended a few centimeters above the ground, looking at the Big Dipper that was dyed red by the fire. Brother Lianjun, don't just stand there. Look and see how many can be eaten, Haruko Suzuki shouted again. At this time, Lianjun said in a low voice, I say, Orochi, are we actually very weak in this world? In the face of Lianjun's sudden question, Orochi did not immediately respond. It just continued to do its own thing, devouring the soul power that it found. Wisps of purple smoke drifted out of the body and were inhaled into Haruko Suzuki's nostrils. Haruko Suzuki showed a comfortable expression at this time. When this was over, Hakata slowly opened its eyes and said coldly, Isn't it because you have seen your own incompetence that you want to obtain more power? Those with talent can climb the peak. Those without talent can only be mediocre for life. This is just an excuse given by the lazy. Lien Jun suddenly turned to Hakata. It did not expect this guy to say such a thing. There's still some left. Do you want to eat it? Hakata pointed at the body on the ground. It's too little. You eat it yourself. Lianjun shook its head. I can rely on the power of the starlight to recover. It's just a little slower. Hakata shrugged and swallowed the rest of the body. What are you going to do next? Lianjun suddenly asked, since we already know that Natsuya Suzuki's real body is such a horrible guy, and that he is related to that place, we don't need to keep Suzuki's family, do we? Would it be difficult for a god of slaughter who can slaughter a big clan without blinking an eye to kill me now? Hakata shook its head. He just gave a warning. So as long as I don't do anything harmful to Haruxan Suzuki, it can be considered as a kind of acquiescence. What does it mean? Lien Jun frowned. I don't know the details. Hakata said helplessly. I just had a feeling that if I ran away from this body because of fear, I'm afraid I wouldn't be here anymore. I really don't want to see such a ferocious guy again. Lien Jun was silent for a moment. It knew clearly that what Hakata did not want to face was not the real body of Natsuya Suzuki, who was like a god of slaughter, but the mysterious place behind him that no one could figure out. By the way, when I first investigated, I found a place. Lien Jun suddenly said. It should be the place where the Takizawa family stored their treasures. But I couldn't go through it at that time, because there was a defensive force similar to a barrier set up there. Oh, Hakata raised his eyebrows. Now that the Takizawa family is dead and the castle has been damaged to this extent, the defense of the treasure vault is likely to have been weakened or even disappeared. Let's see if there is anything useful. Lienjin nodded. Let me finish this. Sakata Kintoshi, who was on the verge of collapsing, quickly got up and regained his composure. In fact, he was a relatively free and easy person. Of course, the deduction of his performance was enough to make him feel the pain for a long time. Basically, Black Soul envoys were salesmen who attracted customers for the club and earned resources. Most of the envoys could do this job, but after all, there were differences between individuals. Some envoys were born unsuitable for this kind of work. So later on, another kind of job was born, professional debt collectors. Of course, it was rare to meet a guy who dared not pay back his debts, but there were still some. To deal with these stubborn guys, it was time for the professional debt collectors to take action, but the performance of debt collectors was generally not as good as the Commission of Business Soliciting. As the club's gold medal, self-appointed debt collector, Kinshir Sakata spent almost 90% of his working time in debt collection since he became a Black Soul messenger. It was a very simple idea. Since he couldn't win in terms of quality, he would win in terms of quantity. Sir Manager, is there a guy who owes money and refuses to pay back his debts recently? Sakata Kinshir grinned grimly. My big axe is already thirsty for blood. No, those who are about to pay are all high-quality customers, and they never delay. The servant girl smiled. so you can still squander the rest of your vacation time very easily. Sakata Kinshur felt as if his heart had been shot by an arrow, and his expression stiffened. He sighed inwardly, then glanced at manager Xiongye's child, who had been reborn, and suddenly said seriously, "Sir Manager, please reduce the rest of my vacation time to 3 months. I want to buy some more things." "Okay." The servant girl smiled slightly. Even Black Soul envoys were guests of the club. It was just a special case. A corner of the gate had been broken. This was probably caused by the aftermath of Sakata Kinshi's attack that had cut down the castle. The gate was located under the ancient castle, in other words, inside the mountain. Seeing that the aftermath of the attack had damaged the place to this extent, Lien Jun and Hakata both fell silent at the same time. After a long time, Hakata suddenly said, "Sometimes I really envy the guy in that shop." Lien Jun looked at Hakata with some surprise, only to hear Hakata say faintly, "This kind of special power to recklessly release great power in the Lord's realm without fear of the Lord's realms will come in to find you. Don't you envy it? Let's go in," Lien Jun said quickly, and then went straight in through the broken gate. Its body did not have a physical body, so it could pass through it directly. At this time, Orochi had to spend a lot of effort to get into this broken hole, but it was obviously worth it. There was a dazzling array of treasures in front of his eyes. I didn't expect the Takizawa family to have collected so many good things. Hakata's eyes lit up at this time. He went straight to the corner of the treasure room and picked up a glass container. Lava Fire Lotus. This kind of extremely masculine thing is rare in modern society. Hakata clicked his tongue. This is probably dug out from a volcanic fire vein of this country. The Takizawa family is finished. These things have become ownerless. Lien Jun said indifferently, "You and I will each take half of the things here." "No problem." Hakata smiled casually. If it wasn't for the fact that he had bumped into the people in the shop today and was given a fright, today would have been a pretty lucky day. Not to mention the treasures in the treasure room. Along the way, Hakata had plundered many souls of the Takizawa family members who had not dissipated yet. After digesting these souls, the injuries he suffered after coming out of Yanwiyue's world would be about 40 to 50% recovered. "What's this?" Lien Jun suddenly stopped and pointed at a brocade box. The reason why Lien Jun was curious was that the words engraved on the brocade box seemed to be from the Pre-Qin dynasty of Hua Nation. "Let me see." Hakata walked over, opened the brocade box, and took out the things inside. There was a handwritten letter and a rolled-up animal skin. These two were old monsters, so it was obviously easy for them to decipher the ancient words on the handwritten letter. "Brother Lien Jun, is this the map of Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum that the Takizawa family said they had?" Hakata's eyes lit up as he stared at his fellow sufferer. As he said that, Hakata stared at the content of the handwritten letter. "It's actually the Pearl of Marquis Sui. The Pearl of Marquis Sui, the Emperor's item that is almost as famous as the Jade Annulus of Eclan." Lien Jun opened his mouth in surprise, then glanced at the treasure room of the Takizawa family. If it's true, it's probably the most valuable thing here. More than that, Hakata took a deep breath. "Brother Lien Jun, do you know the origin of the Pearl of Marquis Sui? It said that when Marquis Sui was traveling, he encountered a giant snake that was cut in half and ordered people to save it. Not long after, the giant snake entered his dream and gave him the pearl to repay his kindness." Lien Jun said without thinking, "What? The Pearl of Marquis Sui has other origins? It's a treasure of our Shangliu family." Hakata grasped the animal skin map in his hand. The giant snake that was saved by Marquis Sui was the direct descendant of our Shangliu family's ancestor. And this pearl was bestowed by our ancestor. It originally belonged to Gongong. It belonged to Gongong, the water god. Lien Jun opened his mouth wide. The fire had died down, and only some embers were still burning in some small corners. The club maid was now writing something with her finger on the forehead of the boy who had been restored by physical creation. It was a black pattern like a lotus. Sakata Kinshur watched silently until Yu Ye's finger left the boy's forehead. Then he heaved a sigh of relief. I'm afraid only Mr. Steward can do such delicate work. According to your request, I've sealed the boy in this seal. Yi said indifferently. When the boy can bear it, the seal will be released automatically. Kinshur Sakata nodded. According to his original intention, he wanted to end the child with his own hands, but in the end, the child had a strong will to live. Kintaro, since you don't intend to continue sleeping and use the rest of your holiday in a sober manner, then you'll be in charge of taking care of this child. Yi smiled faintly. Me? Sakata Kinshur was stunned. The servant girl said matter-of-factly, "Of course. I'm afraid the boy doesn't know how much power he can exert with his current body. If he doesn't handle it well, it may cause chaos. He needs a supervisor. There's no one more suitable than you. Isn't it all because of you?" Sakata Kinshur muttered in a low voice. "Oh, Kintaro, what are you talking about?" No. Sakata Kinshur quickly shook his head and said seriously, "I just think it's a good decision. Well, it's really a good one. Then I'll leave it to you." Yi smiled and turned away. Sakata Kinshur suddenly said, "Director, don't I need to meet the new boss now? Master said at the beginning that he'll wait for the Black Souls to wake up." Sakata Kinshur was startled and then asked, "Then Uncle Manager is Sakata Kinshur?" The servant girl suddenly called out Sakata Kinshi's full name. This made Sakata Kinshur straighten his body and subconsciously answer, "Yes." Yi looked back and said softly, "We only have this master now, so the new boss is naturally him. Do you understand?" Yes. What an obedient child." Only then did the servant girl leave, satisfied. Looking at the disappearing figure, Sakata Kintoshi let out a long sigh and muttered, "This head steward is really not an ordinary kind of loyal." Sakata Kinshur scratched his head, then sat down and closed his eyes as if waiting for something. After a long time, a little fluorescent light flew in from all directions and then slowly gathered in front of Sakata Kinshur. This was another service he had purchased, collecting the consciousness of Manager Xiongyi that had dissipated between heaven and earth but had not been completely annihilated. The fluorescent light in front of him gradually turned into a human figure. It was Sakata Kinshur. No, it was the manager Natsuya Suzuki was familiar with, Xiongyi. Manager Xiongyi looked at Sakata Kinshur with a smile and did not speak. Sakata Kinshur suddenly asked, "Manager, there's a question I've been wondering. Why did you pick me up at that time? To you, I'm just a stranger, right?" He whispered, "Probably because you felt that there was no way to throw me away. You're like a stray cat that's about to freeze to death." Stray cat? To me, you're like a stray cat that's about to freeze to death. Xiongyi smiled. "It's really hard to bear to leave you. Are you an idiot?" Sakata Kinshur muttered to himself. "Then, I'll leave this child to you." Xiongye's body began to slowly dissipate. After all, it was just a collection of consciousness that was about to be annihilated, and it could not be maintained for long. In the end, Xiongye made a drinking gesture. "I really want to have a drink with you again, Suzuki. Bastard. Go." Chapter 969. In front of the teppanyaki shop in front of the station, a fierce-looking young man suddenly pushed open the door. His eyes were ferocious, his hands were in his pockets, and his back was slightly hunched when he walked. The moment people made eye contact with him, they would unconsciously avert their eyes. The diners lowered their heads and ate the food on the table. The shop suddenly quieted down. The ferocious young man walked straight to an empty table in the innermost part of the shop. But surprisingly, the ferocious young man didn't sit down immediately. Instead, he pulled out a stool for a child to sit down. It turned out that the young man was followed by a child in a white robe. It was just that the young man was so fierce that people ignored the child behind him. Speaking of which, the child was very unusual. For example, the white robe he wore was like that of Pichu in the fairy tale, and the ribbons he used to wrap his eyes. 5 sets of text burn. The ferocious young man sat down and yelled at the owner of the shop. Okay, right away." Seeing that the boss hurriedly lowered his head to cook, the ferocious young man clicked his tongue. Then, he glanced at the child beside him and began to pour a cup of warm water for the child. Then, he grabbed the child's palm and stuffed the cup into the child's hand. Wait a moment, it'll be ready soon, the young man said with a bad attitude. In fact, his voice was much lower than before. The child just nodded and didn't say anything. The child didn't remember how he followed this person, nor who his parents were. He only vaguely knew that he had parents. These memories were quite vague. In the words of this ferocious young man, she was picked up by the roadside. Because she looked obedient, she was brought along. If she was not obedient, she would be abandoned. Then I'll become more obedient, the child thought silently in his heart. Right, he could see the appearance of this big brother. Although the ribbons were wrapped around his eyes, he didn't know why he could see, even though the angle of view was a bit strange. Don't open your eyes casually for the time being. It will be very troublesome. So, don't open your eyes without permission. But I'll find a way. Don't worry, kid. That was what he told himself. She had to be obedient. She remembered this big brother's warning, so she tried her best not to open her eyes. At this moment, hey, did you hear? I heard that a large family was burned down in a fire overnight. I heard that a lot of firefighters were mobilized. The customers in the restaurant were discussing something. At this time, the boss had already served a large portion of the text burner. The ferocious young man directly started to eat in big mouthfuls, completely ignoring the discussion of these diners. However, the ferocious youth's sleeve was suddenly pulled. It was that child. Brat, what's the matter? The ferocious youth frowned. The child raised his head slightly and asked curiously, "Do we have the money to pay the bill?" The ferocious youth was stunned for a moment. Then, without thinking, he raised his hand and knocked on the child's head. He scolded in a low voice, "Idiot! Don't you know that there's such a thing as a free meal in this world? Oh, you stay and wash the dishes later. I'll leave from the back door." The ferocious young man quickly said in a low voice, "You're a child. They won't make things difficult for you. So, I'll bear the infamy. Be grateful to me. Oh, let's eat. Oh, hurry back to your bastard parents. Let's go." The boss's tone was obviously very bad. If it weren't for the fact that he was still a child, he would probably beat him. Of course, the boss's wife's persuasion was also another reason. Because she was worried that the guy who looked like a bad guy would retaliate, she chose not to call the police. Of course, there was also the possibility that the child might have been abducted by the ferocious youth. But considering the ferociousness of the youth, the boss's wife still subconsciously did not think in this direction. Don't do it next time. The boss's wife still reminded him softly. If there's danger, just shout loudly for help. The boy bowed very politely and then went away. Watching the child leave from the back alley, the boss frowned at this moment. What's wrong with this child? Isn't he blind? Who knows? The boss's wife shook her head and then took her husband back to the barbecue shop. At this time, the child walked out of the back alley and looked around. Finally, he saw the big brother who picked him up. He was standing in front of a vending machine and kicking it hard. Soon after, the big brother came back with 2 cans of drinks and threw one to him. It was the taste of milk. At the same time, it was still warm, not cold. "Kid, finish it quickly. I'll go somewhere with you later." The ferocious youth squatted down and said in a bad tone, "I won't stay with you for long. So after teaching you how to survive, I will leave. Do you understand?" The child nodded silently, but the hand holding the milk can tightened a little. This sudden action directly crushed the milk can, and the milk immediately splashed out and sprayed on the child's face. "Kid, you're so troublesome." The ferocious youth immediately wiped the child's face with his sleeve. "Drink my bottle of milk coffee." "I'm sorry." The ferocious youth shook his head and sighed, then grabbed the child's hand and prepared to leave. "Where are we going?" The ferocious youth said, "I said to teach you how to survive. Just follow me." Soon after, the door of the manager's office of an underground bar near the station was suddenly violently broken open. At the same time, several men were directly thrown into the office. This made the manager, who was fooling around with a female employee in the office, suddenly stand up in fright and quickly pull out his belt. Who is it?" "Big brother, someone is here to challenge us." A young man who fell to the ground at this time covered his stomach at this time and said painfully, "Challenge us? Who is so bold?" This manager was not a guy who was easily compromised. Hearing this, he directly snorted, See if I don't beat him to death. Oh, who wants to beat me to death? A ferocious youth directly walked in, took down the door of the office without saying anything, and then casually threw it on the wall. The door was directly smashed into pieces. Seeing this, the manager of the underground bar suddenly swallowed his saliva. His legs directly trembled to the point that he had to support himself on the table to barely stand up. Hey, are you the boss here? The ferocious youth came in front of the manager of the underground bar and directly reached out to grab his collar. I have something to ask you. What is it, big brother? Do you have anyone who owes you money? The ferocious youth directly asked. Debt? Oh, I understand. The manager of the underground bar suddenly quivered, then quickly looked at the female employee whose clothes were messed up by his teasing, and shouted, Go! Open the safe next to you. Take out the money. Who said I want your money? Are you an idiot? The ferocious youth directly raised the manager of the underground bar with both hands. I'm asking you. Do you have anyone who owes you money? Huh? Do you hire a debt collector here? The ferocious youth added, Hire me. I promise to help you perfectly collect those rotten debts that you can't get back. This. The manager widened his eyes, being lifted by a guy who violently tore open the door with one hand and asked to hire a debt collector. What should he do? He couldn't wait online, but it was urgent. Hire or not. Say something. Bastard. Hire. Definitely hire. Definitely hire you, big brother. Not me. It's the two of us. The ferocious youth coldly snorted. The manager subconsciously glanced behind the youth. A child about 10 years old? Hire both of you. Say it earlier, what a waste of time. The ferocious youth directly threw the manager of the underground bar on the big office chair behind the table, then reached out to grab the child beside him, and said with a ferocious smile, Kid, get ready to work. Oh, the roaring sound of the engine. Hongqiao International Airport. This was the international airport of Shanghai, the world civilization of China. The endless stream of flights to and from all over the world never stopped. And naturally, the flights from all over the world never stopped either. Passengers taking United Airlines flight CZ3516, please go to a sweet voice sounded from the broadcast. But the passage at this time was unexpectedly cold and cheerless. Of course, this was because first-class passengers left first, and also because it was late at night. So cold, Song Ying subconsciously wrapped the coat on her body. Although she knew the surface temperature when she came out, so she temporarily put on the coat, but the huge temperature difference still made her unable to adapt to it. She shuddered in fear. Of course, it's still midwinter here. Song Howren looked at the airport outside the glass, smiled, and said, It will be colder near Mount Tai. Aren't you cold? Song Ying glanced at Luochio at this time, and couldn't help but frown when she saw that his clothes were still very thin. It's okay, Luochio casually said. When I went to South America, it was already winter here. Didn't you always grow up in the South? Song Ying curiously asked, Why are you so cold-resistant? Maybe it's because of the training. Luochio smiled casually. Song Ying originally wanted to roll her eyes, because Luochio looked just like a weak scholar, and she couldn't see how solid he was. Well, it's been a long flight. Let's go to the hotel to rest first. We still have to hurry tomorrow. Song Tianyu said at this time. Indeed, this flight didn't arrive here directly from South America, but through Europe, and then from a small country in Europe to Hong Kong and China, and then to Shanghai. It could be said that they didn't stop all the way. As for Mr. Blind, he directly separated from the Song family from the airport in Hong Kong, but the two sides had already agreed on a time to meet. The room was booked in the hotel in the airport. Under the arrangement of Uncle Wu, they quickly checked in. At this time, the group of people from the Song family met several men in the lobby of the hotel. Master Song should know the man who looked to be in his 40s. Master Song, I'm very happy to be your host again. This man with a somewhat gloomy face was probably not used to smiling. At this time, the smile on his face looked a bit scary. Thank you. Song Tianyu just nodded and didn't say anything. Behind him, Uncle Wu was introducing Song Ying and Luochio. This gentleman is called Ah Chi, the right-hand man of an old friend of Master's in China. Every time Master returns to China, he comes back through this old friend's channel. This can avoid a lot of trouble. Old friend? Song Ying was slightly stunned, and then said, "Is he from the Zhang family?" Uncle Wu said, "This Mr. Ah Chi seems to be from the lady's family. But to be honest, she is the only one from the old lady's family at present." "That's incredible. One person holding two aristocratic families." Song Ying murmured, "She must be an old witch who is difficult to get along with." Luo Qiu, speaking of the Zhang family, Luo Qiu, Luo. It was unknown when Luo Qiu walked to the entrance of the hotel lobby. Song Ying glanced at her grandfather, who was talking with Mr. Ah Chi, so she walked to Luo Qiu unhappily. This guy was good at everything, but one thing was he liked to run around, and when he ran around, he seemed to become air. If you didn't pay attention, you wouldn't know where he was. "Can you not run around?" "Huh?" When Song Ying was about to teach him a lesson, she saw that Luo Qiu was holding a little boy's hand. This little boy was about 6 or 7 years old. He had blonde hair, but his face was completely white. He looked a bit like a mixed race. After seeing Song Ying, the little boy directly hid behind Luo Qiu in fear and looked at her in horror. Song Ying felt that she had seen this scene somewhere before. Song Ying's expression stiffened and subconsciously said, "Don't tell me. This child is lost again." It seems that he was going to take a connecting flight, and then I don't know how he got separated from his family. Luo Qiu said. He remembered that the same thing happened in the Song Dynasty Hotel last time. Song Ying shook her head, looking at Luo Qiu curiously, and said, "Are you the kind of person who is particularly easy to attract naughty children? Why are we always able to find lost children everywhere we go? I'll send him out to find the airport guard." Luo Qiu looked at the child and suddenly said, "You are all tired. Go and have a rest. I'll be back later. Let Uncle Wu arrange this kind of thing." Song Ying shook her head. "Try not to wander outside. There are many people in the airport here. Others are probably not easy to deal with." Luo Qiu shook his head, ignored Song Ying, and walked out with the little boy. "Hey, come back." Grandpa and the others went in. "This really—" Song Ying stomped her feet and helplessly chased after them. On the side, Father Song clearly noticed the situation, and at this moment, he ordered in a low voice, "Old 5, have someone follow them and see what Miss and young Master are doing." "Yes, Master." Uncle Wu hurriedly nodded. Song Tianyu then looked at Mr. 7. 7, let's talk about the specifics in the room." That's fine." 7 nodded. He knew that the main purpose of the Song family's return this time was to pay respects to their ancestors. As for the cooperation with the old madam, that was a later plan. However, as someone who had dealt with mausoleums and other places for a long time, for some reason, 7 suddenly felt a chill. Chapter 970. In fact, in addition to the cold winter, there was another thing that troubled Shanghai Airport. It was only a few days before the Chinese Lunar New Year. That was the difficulty of the Spring Festival. Especially because the airport had been connected to the train station a few years ago, the passenger flow here had been maintained at a terrifying number. If there was a weather problem that prevented the flight from departing on time, it was indeed a quite serious problem. Fortunately, it was currently midnight, and there were far fewer people than during the day. After the security check in the terminal building, except for some retail and restaurants that were still open 24 hours a day, many shops had closed. In general, it was a bit deserted. Of course, such an environment was very good for Han Bingjiang. Why? Naturally, it was because fewer people meant a wider field of vision. For an entertainment reporter like Han Bingjiang, who made a living by revealing secrets and breaking news, a wider field of vision was definitely what he wanted. It was easier to secretly take photos of the target. Labels such as the top entertainment reporter and the strongest paparazzi in the industry had been attached to Han Bingjiang in the past few years. This was also a kind of fame. Originally, there would be a lot of breaking news during the new year, but unfortunately, the paparazzi in the studio had gone back to their hometown for the holidays. In desperation, Han Bingjiang, as the boss of the studio, could only do it himself. Today's target was a well-known actress. According to reliable sources, this actress, who looked at people with a pure image, claimed to be a devout believer. She had repeatedly said in front of the media that she refused to have improper behavior before marriage. So far, she had no boyfriend. But this time, She seemed to have a foreign boyfriend and seemed to be going home for the new year. Unveil the hypocrisy of these men and women in the entertainment industry. Let them fall from the altar into the abyss and watch them suffer in the midst of trouble and condemnation. It is far more than the money that can be obtained from this matter. It's really a pleasant thing. What's that saying again? Han Bingjiang recently saw that someone used his profile picture to make an emoji. It was written like this: "I just like to see you gnash your teeth in hatred, but you can't hit me. Go away, little bum. After smoking for so many years, aren't you afraid that your mouth will be smashed?" At this time, a very bloated cleaner squeezed into the smoking room with a dark expression, cleaning up the problems left behind by the old smokers. Han Bingjiang boasted that he was a cultured person. He was too lazy to argue with this bloated Andy. He directly put out the cigarette, but walked out. Well, his mouth felt uncomfortable. After all, he had been lurking in the airport for a long time. Speaking of which, he looked a little hungry. Han Bingjiang, who was about to look for something to eat, suddenly stopped because he saw a high-quality woman. There was no doubt that Han Bingjiang's eyes were very sharp. He could almost see through people's backgrounds at a glance. Obviously, this high-quality woman was either rich or noble and had a good sense of fashion. She was probably a lady from a wealthy family. However, Han Bingjiang couldn't recall where this woman came from. A high-quality woman and an ordinary-looking young man with a child who obviously didn't look like an Asian, felt that this combination was very strange. Out of instinctive curiosity, Han Bingjiang walked towards the young man and woman with a smile on his face. Although his appearance had been exposed to the public due to reading a lot of explosive news in recent years, if he carefully disguised himself, he could still deceive most people. After all, not everyone would remember the appearance of an entertainment reporter, especially the photo and the person in person. There were some differences. What happened? Han Bingjiang had a smile on his face. He looked like a teacher, giving people an amiable and approachable feeling. "This child is lost. We're going to help him," the young man said casually. But after the child saw Han Bingjiang, he quickly hid behind a young man, seeming to be very afraid, which made Han Bingjiang depressed. "Don't mind. This child is very afraid of strangers. Even I am afraid," the high-quality woman said suddenly, seeming to be a little jealous. Han Bingjiang just smiled embarrassedly. "There's no value at all." Han Bingjiang shook his head inwardly. However, as part of his disguise, he still kindly pointed out, "There's an airport duty room not far ahead. You can go and take a look." "Okay, thank you." The young man smiled slightly and suddenly said, "There's also a water dispenser over there, not far away." Han Bingjiang was stunned and subconsciously said thank you, then watched the young man and woman leave with the child, frowned and muttered, "How did he know?" But Han Bingjiang quickly reacted. Because he smoked for too long, his mouth had long been dry, and even his lips were cracked. At first glance, he looked like a thirsty person, but he saw that the child who was far away suddenly turned his head, glanced at him, and then quickly turned his head back. Obviously, he was still very scared. Han Bingjiang shook his head, thinking that he might really be a person who is not liked by children. Well, calculating the time, it is almost the time that the female star's flight arrives, right? Han Bingjiang had no time to eat. After drinking 2 mouthfuls of water from the water dispenser, he hurried to the arrival hall. But to Han Bingjiang's surprise, it didn't take long for him to meet the target of his trip. The new actress who had just won the Best Newcomer Award at last year's film festival, Xiaoan. Han Bingjiang's eyes were very sharp. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to catch so many celebrity scandals. Although the new actress in front of him was wearing a headscarf and sunglasses, Han Bingjiang still recognized her at a glance. The woman in front of him was looking around at this time, as if looking for something. She was the only one carrying a small suitcase, and she didn't even see her assistant, which made Han Bingjiang puzzled. But what made Han Bingjiang even more surprised was that the winner of a newcomer award was walking towards him without saying a word. Moreover, her pace was quite fast. Could it be that I was also recognized? That was not good. If he was recognized, the other party was probably already prepared. In that case, there was no way he could get any useful information. "Excuse me, have you seen a child? About this tall?" The woman took off her sunglasses in front of Han Bingjiang and gestured with her hands, about this tall, blonde hair, a little boy. She exposed herself in front of him without even trying to hide it. Han Bingjiang opened his mouth. If it weren't for the fact that this woman was Qiao, and Han Bingjiang would have thought that he might have mistaken her for someone else. Witch Star didn't avoid him as if he was the plague. No, this may be on purpose. She deliberately pretended not to know him. Is he trying to stall for time? At this time, the foreign boyfriend must be nearby. He's probably trying to cover for me. But why did he mention the child that he had just met? What's your relationship? Han Bingjiang lowered his head slightly and pushed the glasses on the bridge of his nose. That's my son. The woman in front of him. Xiaoan looked worried. I was going to take him back to my parents' house for the new year, but I don't know what happened, but we suddenly got separated. I was going to look for the staff, but I just happened to run into you. You're your son? Han Bingjiang widened his eyes, thinking that he had misheard. Is it really your son? Xiaoan was stunned and frowned. Yes, it's my son. What's the problem? You're Xiaoan? Han Bingjiang frowned. The female, celebrity Xiaoan. Yes, is there a problem? The woman nodded. Oh, I'm sorry if you haven't seen my son. I'll excuse myself. With that, Joan hurriedly walked past Han Bingjiang and shouted, Paul, Paul, can you hear me? Paul? Only Han Bingjiang was left stunned. She didn't have a foreign boyfriend hiding from her fans. She had already given birth to a child, and the child was 7 or 8 years old. Xiaoan was in her early 20s, which meant that she got pregnant out of wedlock when she was in her teens. Breaking news. Super breaking news. Han Bingjiang shuddered and ran after her. Miss Xiaoan, the child you're talking about. I think I've seen him before. Just now, a young man and woman brought a lost child and said that they were going to the guardhouse. Really? That's great. Xiaoan was obviously relieved. Can I go with you? I know the way, Han Bingjiang said enthusiastically. Xiaoan looked at Han Bingjiang strangely, thinking that the middle-aged man was too enthusiastic. Han Bingjiang was experienced, so how could he not see that? He quickly said, To tell you the truth, I'm actually your fan. I like you so much. If I can help you, I'm more than happy to. I see. Xiaoan nodded, but she didn't become very enthusiastic. She just smiled and said, Well, after I find my son, if you don't mind, I'll give you an autograph. Although it's not very valuable. I can't ask for more. Han Bingjiang was as excited as a fan seeing his idol. Then, can we go now? Of course. This way, this way. The two of them hurriedly walked in the direction of the guardhouse. Wait, where are you going? Is the guardroom here? Speaking of which, we just missed a guardroom. You did on purpose, didn't you? He was kind enough to guide you. Why didn't you go to the previous one? Song Ying suddenly stopped. In fact, she didn't stop all the way. Luochio seemed to know where to go, so he just kept holding the child's hand. Except that they met a strange uncle on the way. We don't need to go to the guardroom. Luochio shook his head. Song Ying's eyes widened. So this guy actually planned to bring this little brat around the entire airport? Song Ying sighed. Maybe you're very energetic now, but please, I'm already very tired. We can leave the child to the guardroom. We don't need to do it ourselves. Then, without waiting for Luochio's consent, she directly grabbed the child's hand and led him into the guardroom. Although the child appeared to be afraid of strangers, he didn't make a fuss and just let Song Ying lead him. What an impatient child. Luochio smiled and followed them in. The guardroom was not big, so they could see everything at a glance. Song Ying explained the situation to the airport guard and then began to ask for the child's name. Unexpectedly, no matter how much the child asked, he just kept his head down and didn't say a word. Song Ying exchanged glances with the guard, a helpless expression on their faces. Song Ying even frowned. Big brother, I can't do anything about this brat. I'll leave him to you. I've been on the plane for more than 10 hours, and I'm very tired now. I want to leave first. I'm all right. The guard nodded, feeling that there was no need to keep the child. To bring the lost child to this place was already very kind of them. Miss, please leave a contact number. If there's anything, or if the child's parents want to thank you, they can at least find you, the guard quickly asked politely. No need, just leave it at that. Song Ying shook her head and then glanced at Luochio. She raised her eyebrows, as if to say, See, isn't it done? What a simple matter. Excuse me, are you free? a man and a woman suddenly walked into the guard room. The man was about 27 or 28 years old. He had blonde hair and dark green eyes. He looked very delicate. At that moment, the foreign man asked in a fluent Chinese mother tongue, "When we got off the plane, we accidentally dropped a ring. Can you help us?" Beside the Caucasian man was a woman in a sweater. The woman wore the sweater's hat and a pair of brown glasses on her face, but she didn't say anything. "Oh, is that so? Can you fill in your information here first?" The guard quickly said, "I'm really sorry. A child just got lost here. We're looking for his parents." "It's okay. I'll fill in my information first." The Caucasian young man smiled, appearing very polite. At that moment, Song Ying was about to pull Luochio away. However, when she saw the Caucasian young man, she was stunned and whispered, "I say, doesn't this fellow look a bit like the child?" Chapter 971. Mother. It was a very heavy name in all kinds of senses. Now, for a mother, the corresponding name was naturally her child. It was impossible for a mother to remain calm after seeing her child. If it was a lost child, she would be even more anxious. However, the woman in the child's arms obviously didn't show this. She just looked down at the child, her lips slightly open, and she seemed to be quite surprised. "Is this child your child?" The guard obviously didn't react, but like Song Ying, she also found that the child was similar to the foreign young man. "This is not my child." The woman finally spoke and shook her head, but she also carefully looked at the child's face, and there was a strange feeling in her heart, a very strange feeling, but she turned to look at the foreign young man beside her. The young man probably found something and shook his head in confusion. The woman squatted down and reached out to hold the child's hand. "Child, what's your name?" "Paul," the child said in a clear voice. Oh God, the child finally spoke. After that, no matter how hard the guard and Song Ying tried, they couldn't get the child to speak. If not for his mother, how could the child be so obedient? "Qiaowen." Another female guard who had been sitting at the table suddenly called at this time, and then stood up. "You are Qiaowen, right? I recognize you. I am your fan. The movie you acted in last year was so good." Thank you." The woman seemed to want to deny, but in the end, she admitted it and took off the brown sunglasses on her face. This was a rather delicate and typical face of an Oriental beauty, and maybe because of her young age, there was not much makeup on her face. "It's really you." The female guard was so happy that she forgot where she was. She directly went to Qiao and grabbed her hands. "Can you take a picture with me as a souvenir?" Qiao looked at the foreign young man beside her helplessly. Seeing him nodding slightly, she said, "That's fine, but let's figure out the child first." "Oh, yes, yes." The female guard nodded and then said, "So, this child is really yours?" "Then his father." The female guard subconsciously looked at the foreign young man and widened her eyes. She wanted to say something. It was obvious that she wanted to say something. "No, this child is really not mine." Qiao and shook her head. "I don't know why he called me that, but I hope you don't take it seriously." "Understand, Miss Qiao," and the first guard hurriedly pulled the female guard. "We won't say anything. Also, this guy is new, so he doesn't know how to be polite. I hope you don't mind." They were just security guards in the airport, not special police officers. If they were complained about by a famous person, it would be troublesome. In any case, we must get to the bottom of this. Finally, the foreign young man spoke. "We can't let Qiao get into trouble. It will affect her. I hope everyone can understand." As he spoke, the young man looked at Song Ying and Luochio. He was still very polite. "I hope the two of you can understand." Song Ying's temporary thought was, this female star was afraid of getting into a scandal and affecting her career. The foreign young man was protecting her, but his attitude was quite good. As one of the leaders of the Song dynasty group, not to mention a local star, even a member of the royal family of a country was not rare. Therefore, Song Ying was not interested in this kind of thing. "It's up to you. It has nothing to do with me anyway. I'm not interested." She shook her head directly, clearly showing her attitude. "But isn't it easy to find out? Since the child has said his name, why don't you just turn on the radio and shout? The parents of the missing child must be very anxious to find you, right? Won't the truth be revealed then?" Yes, yes, yes. How could I forget about this? I'll do it right away." The guard nodded quickly. The radio in the airport soon sounded. Xiaoan and the foreign young man sat down. Song Ying was about to leave, but she saw Luochio pour a glass of warm water for Paul. Speaking of which, on such a cold day, no one thought of pouring a glass of water for the child. Song Ying suddenly blushed a little. Because Xiaoan directly denied that she was Paul's mother, she kept a distance from Paul at this time. So Paul sat on the chair alone. But the child quickly ran down from the chair and took off his backpack. He had been carrying a cartoon-shaped backpack, a picture book, and a crayon. Paul directly lay on the chair and drew on the picture book with a crayon. The two guards on the side had turned on the radio. The two guards probably saw that Paul had been taken care of by enthusiasts. At this time, they were quite enthusiastic about Xiaoan's work. What kind of people are they? Song Ying frowned, obviously not used to such people. She leaned against the wall, shook her head, sighed unhappily, and then looked at Luochio. She saw that Luochio didn't say anything, just stood quietly beside Paul, looking down at what Paul was drawing. Song Ying also glanced at it curiously. It was just a very simple painting. In his impression, all children of this age who were in kindergarten liked to draw such paintings. A circle and a ray represented the sun. Below was a green grass, and there were a few flowers as big as a house beside it. In the middle, there were two people, one big and one small, holding hands. It was probably Paul himself and his mother. Why are there only two people? Song Ying saw something and couldn't help but curiously squat beside Paul, asking softly, "Paul, right? Where's your father? Why is there only a mother?" She was really just curious. But what Song Ying didn't expect was that after this question, Paul directly put down the paintbrush, then covered his ears in horror, squatting on the ground in horror, trembling. I didn't do anything." Song Ying hurriedly stood up in a panic and spread out her hands. Looking at Luochio, "I just asked a question. It's not necessary, right? What should I do?" "Let me do it," Luochio said softly, then picked up the picture book on the chair and glanced at it. Then he glanced at the crayon bag, and an orange-red one jumped out from it, then squatted beside Paul. "Aren't you going to paint the color of the sun?" Paul didn't respond, still squatting tightly with his hands covering his ears. Luochio said softly, "If the sun isn't painted, it will be very cold. Then you and your mother on the grass will also be cold. Aren't you afraid of the cold?" The child gradually removed his hands from his ears, opened his eyes, and then nodded timidly. Luochio then handed the picture book and crayons to Paul. After the child took it, he began to lie on the chair again and began to paint with the crayons. Luochio continued to watch quietly. Only a good-tempered person can do this. Song Ying thought so. If it were her, she really wouldn't know how to deal with children. This guy, when he has children in the future, should be a very good father, right? Song Ying suddenly became a little distracted. On the other side, Joan had been watching the child, at least from the corner of her eyes. The two guards asked some gossipy questions from time to time, and Joan also responded with a few words. Generally speaking, she was not too enthusiastic, which was probably to maintain her image as a public figure. "Excuse me, I have to go to the washroom," Joan suddenly said at this time. "I need to touch up my makeup." The foreign youth next to her secretly thought that Joan had just left, after getting off the plane. However, he quickly realized that they were probably trying to avoid the two passionate guards. "I'll go with you." The foreign youth smiled at this time. Joan said, "No, if the child's parents come later, you can prove it." Thinking of this, the foreign youth quickly nodded. The two guards didn't say anything about Joan's temporary departure. Perhaps they realized that it was inappropriate for them to be so enthusiastic about Joan. The two guards were embarrassed and didn't say anything. Because of this, the guard room suddenly became quiet. At this time, a song suddenly sounded, a childish voice. Paul was humming an unknown song, as if there was no one else around, while drawing his own painting. It was quite a nice song, at least that was what Song Ying thought. And when the child hummed, the voice was particularly crisp, which gave a different feeling. This song, but at this time, the foreign youth who was sitting there suddenly came over, looking surprised or inconceivable, even a little excited. He even ignored the others and directly grabbed the child's arm that was painting. "This song, where did you hear it?" Perhaps it was because this foreign youth's appearance was too frightening that the child returned to his previous state of fear. The foreign youth regretted at this time. Is this song very important? Luaccio suddenly asked at this time. The foreign youth's face suddenly turned red. Luaccio ignored him and just picked up the crayon that the child threw on the ground in panic. At the same time, he picked up the child and said softly, "Go over there. It's more comfortable to sit there." He was talking about the position where the guard sat when they were working. Seeing that Luaccio was comforting the child, Song Ying frowned and looked at the foreign youth, saying unhappily, "What's wrong with you? Why are you scaring the child?" "Sorry, I really didn't mean to." The foreign youth looked apologetic, then glanced at Paul and hesitated. "It's just the song the child hummed just now. What's wrong with the song? I think it's very nice. What's the problem?" The foreign youth looked at the crowd, afraid that if he didn't give an explanation, it would be very difficult to calm their anger. So he sighed. "To tell you the truth, I'm actually a composer. The song the child hummed just now, this song. What's the problem with this song?" The guard asked curiously. The foreign youth gritted his teeth and said, "I'm writing a new song, but I only wrote the beginning. I can't write the rest no matter what. But the song the child hummed, the beginning is exactly the same as what I wrote. But the rest, how is it possible? I wrote less than a third. Could this be the so-called creative collision?" The female guard quickly reacted. "Isn't this a common thing? For example, those TV series, most of them have almost the same script. The beginning of many songs is quite similar." "Probably." The foreign youth had to nod. He understood that as an adult, if he didn't let the child go, it was already a moral problem. But he was unwilling in his heart. No matter how creative the collision is, it is impossible to be completely the same. This is the beginning part. There is also the style. The song the child hummed, the style at the end, is obviously so familiar to me. It feels like I wrote it myself. But although this matter was settled, the foreign youth probably felt ashamed and embarrassed to stay here. So he quickly said, I'm going to wash my face. Excuse me." After the two guards saw the foreign youth leave at this time, the female guard suddenly whispered, "Why did both of them find an excuse to run away? Who knows?" The guard shrugged and signaled with his eyes. It turned out that his hand was under the table, and his hand was still holding a mobile phone. On the mobile phone, there were many photos of Qiao and the foreign youth and the child Paul. The female guard opened her mouth, and the male guard quickly made a gesture of silence. "Don't talk." She could only nod. After all, she was just a newcomer, and the person in front of her was an old man. She really didn't dare to offend him. But it's strange. The broadcast has been broadcast for a while, right? Why hasn't anyone come to claim the child? The female guard was puzzled. There's no news from the TV station. Didn't anyone ask, "Brother, is this child really Qiao and the foreign youth's child?" "Well, it does look like it." The male guard stared at the photo on the mobile phone screen. "There is a child named Paul in guard room 47. He is about 7 years old. Please ask the parents of this child to contact the staff as soon as they hear the broadcast." Han Bingjiang stopped at once, looking at Qiao on beside him. "Paul, is that your child's name?" It turns out that he is in room 47. No wonder we didn't find the room just now. It turns out that the two people went there. "Let's go there quickly, Miss Qiaoan." "Okay." Qiaoan seemed to be relieved, and there was a smile on her face. But when they passed by the bathroom in the aisle, Qiaoan suddenly said, "Can you wait a moment? I want to touch up my makeup. Anyway, the child has been found, so there is no hurry." Before Han Bingjiang could react, Qiaoan walked straight into the ladies' room. Han Bingjiang shook his head inwardly. Touching up her makeup at this time of the year, these stars were really too much. It was late at night, and there was no one nearby. The ice monster looked around, and suddenly he was addicted to smoking, so he wanted to hide in the bathroom and smoke a cigarette. Anyway, he had secretly brought the match in and smuggled it in. But when Han Bingjiang quietly walked into the male bathroom to light the cigarette, he suddenly saw someone walking towards him from behind the mirror. Han Bingjiang put the match and cigarette into his pocket at once, and turned around, but he saw Qiao and Miss Qiao and, "Why are you?" Chapter 972. The foreign youth, who said he was going to the bathroom to touch up his makeup and wash his face, had not come back yet. The female guard poured some water for Luocio and Song Ying. It was a little quiet in the guardroom. Bored, Song Ying covered her mouth and yawned. Probably because she was too bored, she casually picked up the things on the table and took a few glances at them. It seemed to be the lost item list filled by the foreign youth, an emerald green ring. It seemed that among the many accessories, the loss rate of rings was the highest. Song Ying did not think much, and then glanced at the contact name written by the foreign youth. The handwriting was beautiful. Song Ying could not help but look at it again and read, Ego, Mose, Amadeus, C, M.O., Mozart. Song Ying yawned again and tried to read it coherently. Mose, Amadeus, Mozart. I hate this kind of long name the most. Luocio suddenly glanced over at this time. Song Ying shrugged and put down the document. Then she glanced at the two guards who had nothing to do next to her, as if to say, I didn't mean to look at other people's things. They put it here casually. Luocio smiled. Song Ying glared at him, then suddenly moved her chair closer and joked. That guy just said that he's a composer and has the surname Mozart. Could he be Mozart's grandson or something? Of course, she was just joking. After all, rather than having the same surname, she could even pull out many people with the same name. What if it's true? Luocio suddenly asked. If it's true, Song Ying was stunned. Although she asked such a question, she did not think about what to do if it was true. People were often like this. They were curious about a question and raised a hypothesis, but never thought about what to do after the hypothesis. I don't know, Song Ying said subconsciously. Even if Mozart really appeared in front of me, I can't do anything. I'm not his fan. Why don't you go back to the hotel first? Luocio suddenly said at this time. I'm not too tired. It's okay to stay a little longer. Are you concerned about me? Song Ying looked at Luocio coldly. Is there a problem? Luocio smiled slightly. Song Ying was stunned, then suddenly slapped Luocio's face with both hands. This was not a slap, but a clamp on Luocio's face with both hands. Thank you very much. I'm still very energetic. Luocio blinked, probably because he did not understand Song Ying's action at this time, and was a little surprised. Just as he was about to say something, a loud noise came from outside. It was really deafening, especially in the deserted airport terminal building in the middle of the night. Along with this loud noise was the ear-piercing sound of an alarm. Is it a bomb? Song Ying stood up suddenly and frowned at the same time. The two guards at this time called the airport terminal in a panic, intending to inquire about the situation. As for Paul, he directly squatted under the table and covered his ears, looking very scared. Luocio was thoughtful. Soon, the guard learned the situation from the airport terminal and told everyone. There was an unknown explosion in a men's washroom on this floor. The airport's special police have been dispatched. If possible, please come with us to a safe place. Now we have to completely block all the entrances and exits. We don't know if the same situation will happen in other places, whether there are dangerous people causing damage. Please understand. Was this really something that could not be helped? Song Ying contacted Song Howren in the hotel while nodding to Luocio. At the same time, she walked to the door of the guard room and looked at the situation in the corridor. Paul was still squatting under the table in panic. Luocio pushed the chair away and squatted in front of Paul, suddenly saying, Do you still want to stay here? If you want to go back, you can do it now. Paul slowly opened his eyes. The child's eyes were obviously very scared, and at the same time he cried, Mom, okay. Luocio nodded and then stretched out his hand. Paul hesitated for a moment, but finally let go of his ears and put his palm on Luocio's hand. Luocio smiled, then pulled Paul out from under the table and carried him. At the same time, he began to pack Paul's things. A picture book and a crayon bag. Don't worry about that. Let's take shelter first. Song Ying hurriedly shouted at the door. She had not made any phone calls. Obviously, she had contacted the Song family. And at this time, there were two men in black suits outside the door. They were the bodyguards who accompanied the Song family. They were carefully selected from the village of the Song family. As for how these two people suddenly appeared, there was no need to think too much. Probably after seeing Song Ying and Luocio's private action, they had been following behind to take care of them. Luaccio carried Paul's school bag and walked out with the child, saying calmly, "Let's go." The two bodyguards of the Song family stood in front of Luaccio and Song Ying, and at the same time looked at the front and back with serious eyes. This made the two guards in the guardroom click their tongue in wonder. This man and woman, are they some kind of young master or young lady? After pouring cold water on his face, Agamos took a deep breath, wiped his face, and then looked at himself in the mirror. But in his mind, the song that the child Paul hummed kept replaying. I just can't get it out of my head. It's not because of a clash of creative ideas. But if that's not the case, then where did this song that's more complete than the siren song that I wrote come from? Could it be that there was someone who wrote it earlier than him, and it was exactly the same, and he had plagiarized from someone else? Ridiculous. Agamos took another deep breath. His family was a bit special. His elder brother was a complete genius in the eyes of his family. Agamos only needed a few days to practice the song that he needed several months to master. In the eyes of his family, his elder brother was completely the living ancestor of his family. His family had high hopes. No matter how hard he tried, he could only stand behind his family and look at his elder brother, who was like the center of the world. Agamos thought that he would be like this for the rest of his life. However, his brother, who was as bright as a star, suddenly gave up on music and became an archaeologist. He used his almost perfect hands to dig up the soil on the ground. Those hands, which were like the masterpiece of God, should be dancing on the black and white keys. Mother, always nagging like this. Archaeology, so be it. Agamos felt that at least he had never given up music. It was just that his family had never acknowledged his talent. He was a person without talent. But Agamos never gave up. He wanted to prove himself. Even if he was not on par with his genius brother, at least he still had talent. This song was the work he used to prove himself. He had been writing it for nearly 2 years. Although the progress was slow, every note, every section condensed his heart and soul. But now he was told that this song had existed for a long time, and Agamos' painstaking work was a complete joke. If he had not grown up in a good family environment, he would have gone crazy from the stimulation. Of course, it was not much better now. Joanne, Agamos thought of the woman he liked. She was the one who gave him the inspiration to create this song. She could always give him peace. Agamos picked up the phone at this time, just outside the bathroom. This should be the nearest bathroom after coming out of the guardhouse, but Agamos did not see Joanne on the way here. She might not have come out yet, right? But what puzzled Agamos was that the phone had been ringing for a long time, but no one picked it up. Agamos, who was more sensitive to sound, did not hear the phone ringing from the ladies' bathroom. Strange. Did she go back already? She couldn't have gone to the other side, right? Agamos muttered doubtfully. Agamos. Just then, he heard Joanne's voice. It was Joanne's voice, but there seemed to be something different. Despite his doubts, Agamos turned around and saw that it was indeed Xiao, and why are you? Agamos opened his mouth slightly. There was a strange feeling in his heart that he couldn't put into words, but he couldn't tell what it was exactly. What's wrong? Joanne looked at Agamos in confusion. Are you not feeling well? Oh, it's nothing. Agamos shook his head, thinking that it was probably because of the song that he was too concerned about. He tried to calm himself down. Maybe I'm a little tired. After all, it was such a long flight. Maybe you should ask Paul about the origin of this song. At least if there was really someone who wrote a song with the same idea as him, he could get to know them. Maybe you're really too tired. Joanne reached out and grabbed Agamos' hand. She blinked and asked, Are you really okay? Agamos smiled slightly to comfort her. At the same time, he looked around nervously. Didn't you say that we can't be too intimate in the Gong Gong place? No one. Fool. Joanne rolled her eyes at Agamos coquettishly. I didn't even bring my assistant this time. If I'm not afraid, what are you afraid of? I'm too nervous. Agamos smiled bitterly. There were many twists and turns in the process of him and Xiao and getting to know each other, and then falling in love with each other. Up until now, their relationship was still pure and innocent. Because Joanne was indeed a devout believer, she would resist certain behaviors before marriage. Why don't we leave now? Joanne suddenly said. After all, there are too many people here. If we stay for too long, there will be problems sooner or later. I don't know if there are paparazzi lying in ambush nearby. Oh, that's really bad. Agamos agreed. It was a common thing for celebrities to be secretly photographed and followed. But what about the kid in the guardhouse? Agamos asked worriedly. If we don't clarify, God knows if the two guards will spread the news. And they're a bunch of young men and women. We don't know them. After all, your identity has been exposed. Are you stupid? The kid has been handed over to the guards. If his parents come and claim him, everything will be cleared up. Joanne said impatiently. That's true. Agamos nodded and suddenly said, but what about the ring? I found the ring. Joanne raised her hand. On the middle finger of her right hand, there was an aquamarine ring. Seems like it's fated to be with me. I picked it up on the way back. It's good that you found it. Agamos nodded, but he was not as happy as he thought he would be, because he had no reason to stay. Then he would not be able to find the truth of the song. You still don't seem happy? Joanne lowered her head and looked up. Isn't this ring an important gift from your brother? No, you think too much. Agamos smiled. Then let's go. Bang! There was a sudden loud noise, followed by a shrill alarm. Joanne looked back in horror, but there was no one in the corridor. Joanne took a few steps back and grabbed Agamos' hand. Let's go. Joanne quickly said, didn't we trigger the alarm? Something might happen. It's not safe. Shouldn't we go first? You're right. Agamos nodded. The two quickly walked to the arrival hall. On the way, they gradually saw passengers coming out from other corridors in a panic. There was an announcement in the corridor calling for passengers to evacuate. Joanne and Agamos soon joined the crowd and came to the arrival hall, where the check-in luggage was picked up. Pain. Han Bingjiang struggled to get up and shook his head at the same time. He only remembered that he was knocked unconscious, and the person who knocked him out was the female star, Joanne. Han Bingjiang subconsciously wanted to rub the place where he was knocked out, but at this time he suddenly found that he was holding something in his hand. He looked down and saw that it was a silver fork, a fork used to eat Western food. The fork was stained with red blood. Han Bingjiang was so scared that he threw the fork on the ground. But this was not what frightened Han Bingjiang the most. What frightened him the most was that in the men's washroom, right next to the position where he got up, there was a woman's corpse leaning against the wall. She was covered in blood. She had probably died from excessive blood loss. The skin on her face was directly peeled off, but her eyes were not closed. The eyelid eyes were staring at Han Bingjiang, as if she was not dead at all. Chapter 973. Han Bingjiang was not a person who had not seen the world. But the scene in front of him was so horrible that his thoughts seemed to be frozen for a moment. His nerves seemed to have become sensitive at this moment, and his hair stood on end. There was even a chill coming up from the soles of his feet. He only remembered that he was knocked unconscious by Qiao. But when he woke up, why was there a female corpse next to him? Furthermore, his face had been skinned. What kind of hatred was this? What kind of cruel method was this? In an instant, Han Bingjiang realized that such a setup was a murder. Han Bingjiang was sure that he did not sleepwalk or suffer from schizophrenia, so it was impossible for him to kill someone when he lost his consciousness. Who framed him? Qiaoan? However, there was no enmity between her and Qiaoan. Even if there was, it would have happened in the future. Furthermore, it would have happened after she exposed that Qiaoan was hiding the fact that she already had a boyfriend. But he had not collected any juicy news today. Oh no, he had already learned from Qiaoan that she had a child out of wedlock, and that the child was old enough to eat soy sauce. This was indeed a piece of juicy news, but he had not reported it yet. So, what was the reason for Qiaoan to frame him? Han Bingjiang could not figure it out, but he understood one thing. If he continued to stay in this place, he would not be able to clear his name if he was discovered. This was a washroom. Even a highly supervised place like the airport, it was impossible to install surveillance cameras in the washroom. So, no one knew what had happened here. There were probably a lot of his fingerprints left here. God knows what kind of arrangements the murderer made after he fainted. The murder weapon. Han Bingjiang suddenly shivered and quickly picked up the knife he threw on the ground. Then, he hurriedly walked to the sink and turned on the tap. He used the water to wash the knife that was used as a murder weapon. I'm afraid it's not just the murder weapon. My fingerprints and footprints are all over the bathroom. And my clothes. His clothes were also stained with blood. Han Bingjiang did not care about other possible fingerprints. He quickly took off his bloodstained clothes and then wrapped the knife. He had to leave this place as soon as possible. Oh, right, he had to avoid the surveillance cameras outside the corridor. Damn it, I don't know if I was caught by the surveillance cameras on the way here. Han Bingjiang felt that he was quite calm. After years of paparazzi experience, he had encountered a lot of special situations, so he had the ability to remain calm in the face of trouble. He could only force himself to calm down. Han Bingjiang secretly told himself that it would be fine, and then hurried out of the washroom. Maybe it was time to call the police. The moment he walked out of the washroom, Han Bingjiang suddenly struggled in his heart. If he cooperated with the police investigation and found any suspicious points, he should be able to prove that he was framed. Thinking of this, Han Bingjiang slapped his forehead. He felt that it was a stupid decision to deal with the fingerprints on the murder weapon. But in the next second, Han Bingjiang felt dizzy. The moment he walked out of the bathroom, several airport SWAT officers appeared in front of him. After these airport SWAT officers saw Han Bingjiang, they were all stunned. But after all, they were well-trained professionals. When they saw Han Bingjiang walk out of the men's washroom with a pale face, holding a bundle of clothes in his hand and looking flustered, they immediately pulled out their guns and pointed at Han Bingjiang. "Don't move. Raise your hands." Under the shouts of several SWAT officers, Han Bingjiang's hand suddenly trembled, and the blood-stained clothes fell to the ground. Not only was the knife used as a murder weapon exposed, but the bloodstains on the clothes were also exposed at this moment. "It's over." Han Bingjiang's lips trembled instantly. At this time, one of the SWAT officers spoke into the walkie-talkie on his shoulder. "Report, we are the third team. We rushed to the scene of the suspected explosion and found a suspicious man." It turned out that they had just arrived and did not have time to enter the washroom to investigate. Explosion. What explosion? Han Bingjiang was stunned and subconsciously looked at the women's washroom opposite the men's washroom, only to see that there was a cloud of smoke inside. Why, he instinctively walked towards the women's washroom, but just as he took a step, his body was instantly pressed to the ground by two airport SWAT officers. Han Bingjiang quickly struggled a few times, but it was no use. "Captain, we found a woman's body inside." When Han Bingjiang, who was still struggling, heard this, he lost all his strength and almost fainted. "It's not me. It's not me. I'm the one who was framed. I'm the one who was framed. I was wronged," Han Bingjiang shouted at the moment. At this time, the person who seemed to be the captain directly said, "Take this suspect away for investigation. In addition, seal the scene, verify the identity of the deceased, and inform the bomb disposal team to check all the places in this building to see if there are any other dangerous explosives." Han Bingjiang's legs were completely weak. He was dragged away by the SWAT officers on both sides. "It's not me. It's not me. It's Xiaoan. It's Xiaoan. It's her. It's her. I was wronged." Following the crowd, Luoqiu and Song Ying quickly arrived in front of the hotel in the terminal building and met up with the Song family. Song Tianyu was naturally very happy to see that the two grandchildren were safe and sound. At this time, the passengers who were originally resting in the hotel also walked out of their rooms, and under the guidance of the airport staff, they went to a safe place. It was impossible to gather everyone in one place. Since there was an explosion, they should have let people go to an open place. Several boarding gates in the boarding building were directly opened, and the passengers who had passed the security check in the middle of the night were transferred to the outside area of the airport. "Can't you know what happened? Achi." Suddenly, Song Tianyu looked at the reception after returning to the country. "Mr. Achi, I'm very sorry, Grandpa." Achi looked apologetic at this time. "I actually frightened you. Don't worry, I will understand the situation as soon as possible." Saying this, Mr. Achi ran aside and began to make a phone call. At this time, Song Howard said at this time, "I'm afraid this is going to scare them half to death. They actually caused a bomb attack in their own territory." At this time, Song Ying, who had already gathered, rolled her eyes at Song Howard at this time. "It's good that they arranged a channel for you to come back. Don't say so much. I don't know if we can find out anything useful. Song Howard smiled and said, You still don't know, right? The airline that I took this time from Hong Kong is controlled by the Zhang family. I don't believe that a Chi can't find out anything. Hearing this, Luochio couldn't help but look at Song Howard in surprise. Hearing the Zhang family mentioned along the way, Luochio had long guessed that this Zhang family might be the Zhang family of his former female classmate, Zhang Qingrue. Although Luochio knew that the only female classmate in his class at that time was very rich, and later proved that Zhang Qingrue's family was a well-deserved hidden giant in the local area. But he didn't expect that the Zhang family had a controlling stake in a civil aviation company. No wonder the flight from South America to China this time was smooth and there were no accidents. By the way, who is this child? Song Howard looked at the child beside Luochio curiously at this time. Song quickly told him about Paul. When Song Howard heard this, he felt that it was just a lost child, so he didn't pay too much attention to it. He smiled and walked forward. However, as Song Howard walked, his footsteps suddenly slowed down. He squatted down and began to tie the laces of his leather shoes. After tying the laces, Song Howard quickly stood up and walked back to the side of his people. But he whispered to the two bodyguards, Someone is following us. When the two bodyguards heard this, they nodded slightly. When the Song family turned the corner of the corridor, they quickly hid at the same time. The boarding gate was right in front of them. The passengers were queuing up, waiting to walk out of the airport runway outside. Everyone saw that they probably couldn't cut the line or something like that. It was really not good to make a disturbance in this situation. The Song family came back in a low-key way this time. They didn't want to be too conspicuous and expose themselves in front of the state apparatus. Seven had already heard the news at this time. He quickly caught up and whispered in front of the Song family, Please don't worry. This time it's not an attack against you. According to what I know, the special police at the airport caught a criminal suspect and are currently interrogating him. In addition, a female body with her face peeled off was found at the scene. Peeled off. Everyone was surprised by this cruel method. What about the explosion? Song Howard was more concerned about the bomb. Seven quickly said at this time, It's not a powerful bomb. The bomb disposal team just found some remnants of wine bottles, burned cotton threads, cigarette boxes, and matchboxes at the source of the explosion. It should be something like a temporary homemade incendiary bomb or something like that. A female corpse and a homemade incendiary bomb. Song Howard was stunned. This doesn't look like a murder. It shouldn't be aimed at you. Seven nodded at this time. Let the police deal with the details of what happened. I think if there's nothing else, the alert should be lifted soon. Everyone, please don't worry. Thank you for your hard work. Master Song said at this time. You're welcome. Seven quickly replied. At this time, the two bodyguards came back with a woman. The woman was still struggling. Master, this should be the person you said was following us. One of the bodyguards said, We wanted to escape immediately after we found out. There should be a problem. Everyone looked at her. Qiaoan? Song Ying recognized the woman who was caught by the bodyguards at first glance. It was clearly the female star Qiao and that she and Luochio met in the guardhouse. But what made Song Ying puzzled was that Qiao was not wearing the sweater at the beginning. Instead, she was wearing a long black trench coat. When did she change it? Song Ying secretly felt strange, and then inadvertently saw a green ring on Qiao's right finger. Song Ying's mind flashed through the list of lost items she saw when she was bored in the guardhouse. She couldn't help but feel strange. Sakura, do you know her? Song Howard was greatly surprised. Song Ying's thoughts were interrupted, and she subconsciously nodded. This is the female star I met in the guardhouse. Song Howard whistled, looking up and down at the woman in front of him. But unexpectedly, Song Ying suddenly stepped on his foot. Don't stare at her. She has a boyfriend. Song Ying pulled Song Howard's ear. Song Howard shrugged innocently, and then waved his hand to let Qiaoan go, but asked directly, Then, miss, why are you following us sneakily? Paul. But Qiaoan completely ignored Song Howard's question and directly rushed to Luochio's side, in front of Paul. Under everyone's puzzled gaze, Qiaoan hugged Paul tightly, with a distressed face. Paul, don't be afraid. Mom is here. Mom is here. Mom. Mom, damn, what's going on? Song Ing looked surprised. Didn't this woman deny it in the guardhouse? You are Paul's real mother. When Xiao in the black trench coat held Paul, she suddenly heard such a question. She subconsciously glanced over and discovered that it was a youth with a calm expression. However, this youth's gaze subconsciously made her feel as if she was afraid. She avoided the young man's eyes. Luacio's eyes. Paul, he is my child, no matter. I'm sorry. She didn't finish her words, but directly lowered her head, holding Paul, and rushed to the crowd. Go back. Song Ing wanted to stop her, but when she remembered that Paul had called her mother once in the guardhouse, she suddenly felt that she was in no position to stop a mother from leaving with her child. Although this mother didn't admit that Paul was her child in front of others for the sake of her reputation, it was really shameful. What kind of people are they, this entertainment circle? Song Ing shook her head. Is it worth it? But Song Howren suddenly said, Xiao Ing, did you get the wrong person? How could it be? Song Ing glared at Song Howren. Then, if you didn't get the wrong person, who is this woman? Song Howren pointed to the front. Up ahead, Xiaoan, wearing a sweater and jeans, was hurriedly walking out of the passageway with a foreign young man. They had probably followed the evacuees all the way here. This. Song Ing opened her mouth slightly and stared at Xiaoan, who was with Agamos. Then, she subconsciously glanced at the spot where Xiaoan, who had just carried Paul and rushed into the crowd, had disappeared. Chapter 974. There was a special interrogation room in the airport. At this time, Han Bingjiang was taken to the interrogation room here. Undoubtedly, as a suspect, Han Bingjiang's hands had been handcuffed. Two special police officers stationed at the airport were conducting a temporary interrogation on Han Bingjiang. Everything was recorded by the camera to avoid illegal interrogation methods. At this time, Han Bingjiang grabbed his hair with both hands. After only half an hour, his face turned a little green. I've said many times, it's really not me. I was framed. Then why did you wrap the weapon with your clothes and leave? The interrogator obviously didn't believe Han Bingjiang. In response to such a question, Han Bingjiang really wanted to slap himself. Why'd he do these things? Was he being too smart for his own good? No, it was just an instinctive means of self-protection. He just didn't expect that he would meet these special police officers at the moment of leaving. The time was like a written script. There was no time for Han Bingjiang to react. I will keep silent, Han Bingjiang suddenly said. I should be able to hire a lawyer. The two interrogators looked at each other, and one of them suddenly walked out. Not long after, the interrogator who went out came back with a bag of things. He took out the things from the bag. It was a burnt cigarette box in a transparent seal bag, and there was also a matchbox. The interrogator suddenly asked, Is this yours? No. Han Bingjiang glanced at it and directly denied. But his expression betrayed him. As an interrogator, it was easy to see that Han Bingjiang was a little flustered at this time. He then said indifferently, We found an auntie who is in charge of cleaning. She said that she saw you in the smoking room for a long time. There is no doubt that you are a person with a smoking habit. There must be cigarette butts left by you in the smoking room, right? As long as we check the residue of your saliva on the filter and compare the type of the cigarette box, it should be easy to find something, right? Han Bingjiang's eyebrows twitched. He gritted his teeth and said, I will remain silent. And the match. The security checkpoint has clearly stated that no flammable or explosive items are allowed in. The interrogator stared at Han Bingjiang. Why did you bring the match in? Han Bingjiang turned his head away. The interrogator suddenly shouted, Because you had planned this all along. The cigarettes and matches are the timers you use to make the incendiary bombs, aren't they? You killed the victim in cold blood, didn't you? You're planning to use this explosion to create chaos so that you can leave, right? Tell me, why did you kill the victims? Nonsense. This is all conjecture and framing. I want to sue you. Han Bingjiang was also very nervous. I've already said many times that I was framed. If what you said was true, why would I wait until the explosion before leaving? Instead of leaving early. Where are your brains? That's where you're smart. The interrogator sneered. You deliberately used this method that ordinary people wouldn't do to pretend that you were framed. Yes, Although it doesn't seem to make sense, what if you directed and acted it yourself? No one is framing you at all. *T. Han Bingjiang pounded the table angrily with both hands. Are you blind? I've already said that Xiao and was behind me. There are so many surveillance cameras in the airport. Didn't you see them? Where are the surveillance records? I'm sorry, we've already checked the surveillance records. Another interrogator said calmly. We didn't find the person you're talking about. Even the surveillance cameras didn't capture you going into the washroom. There's only the image of you coming out. There's no Xiaoan at all. In addition, Xiaoan did exist in the airport, but according to the time of the explosion, she was in the guard room at that time. We have at least 2 airport guards who can prove it. And according to what you said, you and Xiaoan went straight to guard room 47 after hearing the broadcast. May I ask, how could Xiaoan appear beside you and in the guard room at the same time? Impossible. Impossible. Hearing this, Han Bingjiang stood up unbelievably. He even impulsively grabbed the collar of an interrogator. Liar. You're framing me. You're colluding to frame me. I'll sue you. Because Han Bingjiang lost his mind, 2 guards rushed in from outside the interrogation room and pressed Han Bingjiang directly on the table. Liar. Liar. It's not true. It can't be true. It's a liar. See for yourself. This is the surveillance video we pulled out. The interrogator turned the chair at this time. A TV in the corner of the interrogation room directly showed the image of the guard room at that time. The time was right. Han Bingjiang stared at the image of the guard room in a daze. The young man and woman with Paul were clearly there, as well as Xiao and a foreign youth and 2 guards. Xiao and a foreign youth who seemed to be her boyfriend. This was exactly the reason why Han Bingjiang came to the airport. How could this be? Impossible. This is impossible. Han Bingjiang struggled hard at this time. This is impossible. This is impossible, right? The clothes are different. The clothes are different. The Xiaoan I met was not wearing this clothes. She was wearing a headscarf. Their clothes were different. They were different. They were not the same person. Not the same person. Believe me, believe me. I'm innocent, believe me. Humph. Han Bingjiang, you said Xiaoan was with you, and she framed you. And then you said Xiaoan's clothes were different, and they were not the same person. You can't justify yourself at all. The interrogator slammed the table at this time. Tell the truth. Why did you kill the victim in such a cruel way? Who was the victim? It's not me. It's not me. It's not. At this time, Han Bingjiang suddenly closed his eyes at this time. His whole body softened, and he fainted on the ground. He seems to have fainted. At this time, a special police at this time pressed Han Bingjiang's Renjong point, but found no response. Seeing this, the interrogator saw this, frowning. He glanced at the camera in the interrogation room, which was now open to the public. Although he more or less felt that Han Bingjiang was pretending to be unconscious, they could not use violent means to interrogate him. Call the doctor. The interrogator shook his head, saying helplessly, wait until he wakes up. 2 special police officers took Han Bingjiang out of the interrogation room. At this time, the other 2 interrogators in the interrogation room frowned at this time. This matter was actually like what Han Bingjiang said. There were still some doubts in this matter. However, the surveillance video could not be falsified. Still can't find the identity of the victim. The time is too short. The victim has no identification with her. We can only guess that she's a young woman, and the time of death is less than 3 hours. The other interrogator was asked, shaking his head. There is no missing person report. Seems that we can only wait for the DNA to match. Well, by the way, do you think there are really 2 Xiaoans? How is that possible? Do you think you're shooting a movie with a double? Let's wait for the criminal investigation team in the city. They should be here soon. We can only interrogate for the time being. That's true. Let's check the video again. It doesn't make sense that Han Bingjiang went into the bathroom. Okay. The 2 interrogators hurried to study the case in the interrogation room. 2 Xiaoans. Song Ying was very sure that she was not hallucinating, but it was hard to believe that there were 2 Xiaoans, but she was not alone here. There were also Luoqiu, Song Haoran, Master Song, and even Mr. Seven, the receptionist, and so on. Maybe they are twins or something. Mr. Seven was not surprised at this time. Although they looked the same, Their temperaments are a little different, so they should not be the same person. Because the Xiao-ins did not involve the safety of the Song family, it was completely out of Seven's task, so he was not interested in it at all. Xiaoying, don't worry about other people's business for the time being. Master Song said at this time. Since there is a murder here, I'm afraid that the police will intervene soon. 7. If possible, arrange for us as soon as possible. Master Song, don't worry. 7 said, I'll take you back to the hotel later. And don't worry, as long as you stay in the room, I'm sure no one will disturb you. That's good. Song Tianyu nodded and then hammered his shoulder. Well, I've been tired all day. My bones can't bear it anymore. Grandpa, are you all right? Song Ying came to Song Tianyu with concern. At this time, her concern about her grandpa's physical condition had overshadowed her curiosity about the Xiao-ants. Song Ying hurriedly massaged Master Song's shoulders. Because there was no problem with explosives, the flights from now until the morning were temporarily suspended. The airport hurriedly arranged a large number of people to deal with the stranded passengers. Soon after, part of the alert of the airport was temporarily lifted, and the Song family could return to the hotel again. However, after showering, Song Ying couldn't sleep. She thought about the two Xiao-ins, so she went to Luochio's room and knocked on the door. However, after knocking for a long time, there was no response. Is this dead head already asleep? Song Ying frowned with a helpless expression. The moment she was about to leave, she found Song Haoran standing behind her with a smile on his face. Song Ying was startled. Xiaoying, are you planning a night attack at this time of the night? Song Haoran asked suddenly. It's none of your business. No. Say that again if you dare. Song Haoran. Chill. Unexpectedly, Song Haoran made a shushing gesture and then magically pulled out a room card from his sleeve. Song Haoran placed the room card in front of the door, and the electronic lock of the door opened instantly. Song Ying opened her eyes wide and pointed at Song Haoran. You, how did you get it? I got an extra card at the front desk. Song Haoran shrugged and then opened the door with a smile. He said directly without entering the room, Little Luo Chio, do you want to listen to a bedtime story? I'll send you a beauty to serve you. Don't talk nonsense. And keep your voice down. Won't you feel embarrassed if you wake her up? Song Ying grabbed Song Haoran's ear and warned him in a low voice. Where is he? Song Haoran looked at the room in confusion. There was no one in the room. The bed was folded and didn't seem to have been used. There was no one in the bathroom. It could only mean that Luochio was not here. She filled a paper cup with warm water from the water dispenser. Dressed in a black windbreaker, Joan carefully protected the paper cup with both hands, fearing that the water inside would spill out. She was now in a member's lounge in the boarding building of an airline. There was no one in the lounge at this time because most of the passengers were arranged in the same place. Paul, drink some water first. Chowan handed the paper cup to Paul and stroked Paul's face. Paul, you have to be obedient, okay? I'm your mother, okay? Paul nodded timidly. If you're hungry, eat these. Joan pointed at the food on the table. These were the food prepared for members in the lounge. Seeing that Paul still nodded, Chowan smiled. Then she stood up, gritted her teeth, and began to twist a turquoise ring on her finger. She seemed to want to do something with the ring, but the ring didn't seem to do what Joan wanted. She couldn't help but frown, and she gradually became anxious. Why can't you do it? Chowan's expression grew more and more anxious. In the end, she even took off the ring and wiped it with her clothes. Move it. I beg of you. Hurry up and move it. Well, it seems that you don't know how to use this thing. Suddenly, a third voice sounded in the VIP lounge, which was supposed to be empty. Chowan turned around in horror. It was a young man. Is this the item you used to transfer? The young man. Luochio looked at the turquoise ring in Joan's hand. What do you want to do? Joan stepped back in horror. While retreating, she put Paul behind her to protect him. Luochio shook his head. I don't want to do anything. Especially for a mother who can protect her child in the first place. I don't want to do anything to her. It's just that Paul left something with me, and I plan to return it to him. With that, Luochio took off the school bag from his shoulder, looking at Joan. This is Paul's school bag. You left in such a hurry that you forgot to take it. At the sight of his school bag, Paul walked out from behind Xiao and at once. However, in the next second, Chowan pressed him down. Let me do it. Joan quickly walked to Luaccio, grabbed the school bag, and then stepped back cautiously. Besides, I was going to send him back, Luaccio said indifferently. But it seems that it's not that simple. I don't know what you're talking about. Joan still looked at Luaccio warily. She watched Luaccio's movements carefully. Suddenly, she held Paul in her arms, lowering her head and trying to rush out of the door. Luaccio suddenly asked, "What year is it in your world?" The black-clothed Chow and suddenly stopped. Luaccio slowly turned around and asked, "To be exact, what year is it in your world?" Chapter 975. Chowan looked at Luaccio in horror and didn't say a word. In fact, she was afraid of this young man's eyes when she took Paul away from him. What year was it now? This was supposed to be her biggest secret. But how did this young man know about it? He even seemed to know about the ring. You? Are you also? Chowan's mind pointed to an answer that he could understand. Me? Luaccio shook his head. I've always been here. At least, I haven't left this place yet. Then how did you? Chowan was surprised. This was a person who could easily convince others. Instinctively, Chowan did not feel that the other party was lying. Luaccio said simply, just like the ring on your hand. Since it exists, it's normal to have other things that don't conform to common sense. Chowan frowned, but kept a distance from Luaccio. Can I have a look at the ring? Luaccio suddenly asked. Chowan was shocked and stepped back. But Luaccio said, Miss Chowan, don't you want to know why the ring can't be used now? You just want to get it from me. Chowan said with a trembling voice, but at this moment, her hand stretched out uncontrollably. Her clenched hand even opened little by little, exposing the ring in her palm. Obviously, this wasn't Chowan's intention. Her body was no longer under her control, and she immediately became even more terrified. The degree of fear was no less than when she had first obtained the ring's function. But her body soon returned to normal. She clenched the ring in her palm again. Chowan suddenly looked at Luaccio. Luaccio said lightly, I hope you can understand that it's not a big trouble for me to snatch it. So, can I have a look at it? Chowan clenched his teeth, but in the end, he didn't have the courage to run away. Her footsteps were hesitant, but in the end, she still walked to Luaccio's side. She slowly opened her palm again, and her face was full of uneasiness. At this moment, Luaccio took out a brand new handkerchief and covered his palm with it. After that, he picked up the ring from Chowan's palm and started to check it carefully. I met a Miss Chow in the guardhouse. She was much calmer than you, probably because she's an actress, Luaccio said suddenly. Chowan was stunned for a moment before he smiled bitterly. I'm not an actor. We're different. I think I know why it can't be activated. Luaccio quickly handed the ring back to Johann. It seemed that Chowan felt it incredible that Luaccio returned the ring in such a short time. When the feeling of the ring falling into his palm was transmitted to his brain, Chowan in black clothes didn't react at all. You? She stared at him blankly. It's because of the energy. Luaccio said slowly. The energy in this ring has been used up. I guess it's because it's been used too many times. If you want to activate it again, you have to charge it. That's the simplest way. How? Chowan gaped. The ring failed because of such a simple reason. Then do you know how to charge it? Before that, I want to know where you're going first. Luaccio looked at Chowan without blinking. Which must be the world where Paul and I live. Chowan said excitedly. Luaccio closed his eyes. After a long while, he opened them again and sighed. He said calmly, I'm sorry, I don't know how to charge it now. What? Chowan opened her mouth in surprise. At the same time, Luaccio glanced at Paul. Paul suddenly buried his head on Chowan's shoulder, grasping the clothes on Chowan's shoulder tightly. Take good care of this kid, and I believe you will too. Luaccio suddenly said, also, please consider whether you want to kill yourself to get the life you want. I don't understand. You'll understand. I have something else to do, so I'll leave first. Luaccio said. Suddenly, he stepped back from Chowan and gradually disappeared. Wait, come back, come back. At this time, there was no third party in the lounge except for Joan and Paul. Chowan lowered her head, her body trembling slightly. Paul called out softly, Mom. Chowan's body trembled, and he quickly raised his head with a smile on his face. Paul, be a good boy. You have to be obedient, okay? Mommy will protect you. No one can separate us from each other. Of course, of course. Paul lowered his head in horror again and quietly looked at Xiaoan's palm. He trembled and clenched it tightly. His nails dug into his skin and his knuckles turned white. Ring, ring. Xiaoan suddenly looked at the ring in her palm, and a crazy idea popped up in her mind. Since this ring has no energy, then other rings may have energy. Paul, we will definitely go to a happy world where no one will hurt us and separate us. Thank you. Agamos took 2 bottles of water and a heated lunchbox from the airport staff and quickly returned to Xiaoan's side. The airport was not worried about the material problem. After all, there were not many passengers at this time. Currently, the alert in some areas had been lifted and people were being transferred. However, every passenger had to undergo an identity check before they could leave. This wasn't something unacceptable, even though there were already quite a number of tourists making a scene because of the chaos. Almost all the manpower that could be transferred from the airline and airport had been transferred, but they still couldn't digest the current situation in a short period of time. There were too many people waiting in line. Agamos and Xiao could only sit aside helplessly. Let's eat something. We don't know how long we have to wait. Agamos looked at the long line and sat down helplessly. At this time, Xiaoan lifted the blanket on her body and covered Agamos with it. The two of them sat together quietly with a blanket draped over their shoulders. Xiaoan rested her head on Agamos' shoulder and narrowed her eyes. No one knew what she was thinking. Do you remember the concert in New York last winter? Agamos suddenly said. Concert. Xiaoan looked up at Agamos in confusion. Agamos nodded, smiled, and said, You don't remember? Last winter, we secretly went to watch the concert. In order not to be noticed, we deliberately bought tickets early. In the end, it even snowed that day. In the open-air venue, everyone finished watching with blankets draped over their shoulders, just like now. Yes, I don't know how I insisted on watching it. Xiaoan lowered her head and leaned on Agamos' chest. Maybe it's because you were by my side. You really know how to talk. Agamos smiled. I don't know who was the one who wanted to leave in the first place. Did I? Xiaoan closed her eyes. That was you. Agamos just smiled and did not care about Xiaoan's denial. Xiaoan suddenly said, Agamos, let's get married? Marry? Agamos lowered his head and looked at Xiaoan. He looked at this Asian woman whom he had decided on a long time ago. Looking into her eyes, he felt like he was looking into her heart. He subconsciously said, But didn't you say that you wouldn't consider it before you achieve your dream? Xiaoan held Agamos' hands. It's unfair to make you wait for me. Besides, there's no rule that says I can't act after I get married. I don't want to put on a label the company gave me. I'm Xiaoan. I'm myself. Xiaoan, Agamos said affectionately. Xiaoan smiled. It was the kind of smile that could move men, just like the one she had played in the movie she had won an award for last year. It made people pity her almost instantly. It was because of this smile that she was able to stand out from many competitors and successfully win a newcomer award. I want to give birth to a child for you. Xiaoan leaned on Agamos' chest again. I'll teach him how to act, and you'll teach him how to compose. He'll definitely be an outstanding person in the future. Our family will be very happy. It's a future that I can't help but look forward to. Agamos hugged her and lowered his head to smell her hair. He smiled and said, I don't know why, but I feel like you've suddenly become mature and gentle. Are you looking down on me? Xiaoan raised her head and rolled her eyes at him. This was a charm that was hard to see at Xiaoan's age. Agamos could not help but lower his head to kiss Xiaoan's lips. She responded passionately. After a long time, Agamos finally parted, panting slightly. Oh my God, I never knew you were such a good kisser. You're so passionate. Xiaoan reached out and pinched Agamos' waist gently and whispered in his ear, When we get married, I'll give myself to you. Agamos, my love. This was probably a declaration that no man could resist. Agamos only felt that at this moment, his male instincts were a little difficult to control, and his heart was beating fast. How did she become so mesmerizing? Miss Xiao in the airport. After hearing the broadcast, please go to XX Airlines' temporary office immediately. Miss Chow, and in the airport, please. Suddenly, he remembered that there had been several broadcasts in 2 different languages. The sound of the broadcast instantly alarmed the lovers. Agamos and Chow and looked up at the same time, both frowning. What's going on? Why did the broadcast call for you? Agamos looked surprised. Chow unlowered her head. I don't know either, but let's get out of here first. Agamos was stunned, and then he reacted. After the broadcast, there was some commotion at the scene. Perhaps many people had not seen Xiaoan in person, but there were definitely many who had seen the movies she acted in last year. Most of them had heard the name of this newcomer from various sources. Xiaoan? Why does this name sound so familiar? Could it be Xiaoan, the winner of the Best Newcomer Award? Wow, I'm actually in the same place as her. She's my goddess. The discussion gradually became lively. Agamos stood up at once, and, at the same time, pulled Xiaoan up with his hands on her shoulders. The two of them lowered their heads and quickly left the place. You could not blame the police for being the last to arrive, because they were only notified after the incident had happened. Where's the victim? The forensic doctor hurried to the scene, took the work sign, and opened the cordon. The entrances to the 2 washrooms had been sealed, and 3 guards were standing guard here. Inside the men's washroom, one of the guards quickly pointed. The forensic doctor did not say much, and hurriedly led his assistant into the men's washroom. However, not long after, the forensic doctor hurried out. Where's the body? Did you move the body? No, it's covered with a white cloth. Isn't that? Yeah. The guard suddenly looked surprised, because in the men's washroom, where the body was placed, there was only a white cloth. How could the victim's body be seen? Only a large amount of blood was left at the scene. How could it be? The guards looked at the scene in panic, because not only them, but many of the airport's special police officers could prove that the horrifying body was clearly lying there. No one came in. We've been guarding here all along, so it's even more impossible for anyone to take the body out. But the body, how could the body be missing? How could such a strange thing happen? The forensic doctor frowned. He believed in science. You look around, I'll look for clues here, and inform more people to come here. Okay. It was really a scary day. It was supposed to be time to get off work early. The bloated cleaner sighed at this moment. Not only was the airport temporarily closed due to an unknown explosion, but she was also called in by the airport's special police officers for questioning. The guy who hid in the smoking room and smoked fiercely was obviously not a good person. Little punk, how could I get off work late? The cleaner was now angrily beating the dirty water in the bucket with a mop to vent her dissatisfaction. She had to clean several washrooms on this floor before she could get off work. Of course, the airport had temporarily stopped all the work on hand, but if they really waited for the airport to resume work, who knew when they would be able to get off work? So she had to come here quietly. She casually put the wet mop on the ground and started to mop the floor. However, when she came to a certain cubicle, she saw some red liquid flowing out from the door. What the hell? Who's inside? The cleaner knocked on the door. The floor is dirty. Answer me. But no matter how she shouted, there was no response from the cubicle, but more red liquid flowed out. The cleaner frowned and squatted down. She lay on her stomach on the ground and peeked inside through the crack in the door. Ah! The cleaner suddenly screamed, standing up and grabbing her collar in horror. She saw a woman lying in a pool of blood through the crack of the door. Help! Save me! Save me! Help! But the cleaner did not shout for a long time and directly fell to the ground. But strangely, her body did not directly hit the floor, but seemed to be supported by something, so that she did not need to touch the ground. You've worked hard. It was Luacio's soft voice. Have a good rest, and forget this when you wake up. Luacio waved his hand, sending the cleaner aside and sitting down against the wall. After that, Luacio put his hand on the door lock of the cubicle and then gently pushed it. The door was opened immediately. He saw a woman who had been stripped of almost all her clothes, leaving only her underwear. At this time, she was lying next to the toilet. Her body was curled up. Her wrist had been cut, and a lot of blood had flowed out, leading to the other 2 cubicles. It was Chow, and Luacio frowned, and then snapped his fingers.